I feel like, dude, a lot of people getting into it, even though if they have the opportunity and the ability to go to a clinic or get lessons from someone, they won't do it out of like embarrassment. They feel like it's cheesy
so
or like whatever to go get help to learn. Like it's not. Like that's crazy. I would have given anything to have these resources. I didn't know none of this stuff.
I was sitting at like the end of an event at Englishtown, and they had a car show rolling out, and the noise that these cars made is like nails on chalkboard, every single one of them.
Yeah.
They're grinding something.
But you look at every single one of those drivers and they're like,
They're
yeah,
happy
baby. YouTubers left and right are making remote controlled four-wheelers, cars, like all of these different stuff. I would love where you did a remote controlled drift car that was controlled by a sim. So you're driving a sim, but you're physically, it's operating an actual car on track. We can't be that far off.
Wanted this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm Kesha. I get to the paper, boy.
Welcome back to the #1 Drift Podcast on YouTube, presented by Injuku Racing. My name is Dawson, and today we have...
My name is Phil Silva.
Oh yeah, appreciate you coming out. He flew in today, so round of applause for that. I really appreciate it. But yeah, before we get into the podcast, look below the video. Make sure the subscribe button is not still red. If it is, click it and hit that bell notification while you're at it so you never miss an episode. And again, wiring specialties. Do not miss out on this. You've got until, I think, the end of July, something like that. It's 3 months total, 10% off. They don't offer that always. Grab it while you can. Link is in the description. And then, of course, any of the parts and stuff we probably will talk about should be on Injuku. So check that out in the description as well. But that's actually all I got for this one. So not long-winded this time. So yeah, if you want to give an introduction on kind of who you are, what you drive, stuff like that.
So like I said, my name is Phil. I currently drive a 2007 C6 Corvette, LS2 motor. I'm fairly new to drifting. Just got my own car about 6 to 8 months ago. I've been sim drifting since 2019 about. And yeah, just kind of getting into the whole drift scene at the moment and like
figuring things out.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, you've been doing good so far from what I've seen.
Yeah. So one of the big things I think that helped with that was obviously the simming. Like it's a huge training aid. And then what smoothly transitioned over from sim to real life was actually taking classes. So I did 2 classes like with rental cars, which was... It was awesome, really, because like it costs a little bit of money to do the classes, but it's like when you compare that to having to buy a car, having to like prep it for drifting and all that stuff, like getting the parts and like what if you don't like it kind of deal. It made that relatively easy, just showing up, here's some money, let's go shred.
Yeah, right? A little less to think about.
For sure, yeah.
That's the worst part of going to your first event is making sure you have everything. Tools, absolutely. Fucking spare tires, jack stands. Because you're going to work on your shit probably. So.
And like having a mentor as well. So somebody that you can ask, what do I bring to the track?
Right.
Like what tire pressures do I start with? Like that sort of thing was very important and very helpful. And I plan to continue on getting some training and coaching along the way.
Absolutely. If you got the ability to, might as well. And
for sure.
We're going to get into all this stuff too. Don't worry. Like, we'll dive deeper. But we're just getting the gist right now.
So yeah, other than that, my background, I work with cars too. I do paintless dent removal in central New Jersey. My company is called Phil the Dent Guy. Nice. And I don't fix drift cars because usually those are in pretty rough shape to begin with.
Right. Well, tell me about your Corvette. Like what all is done into your Corvette at the moment?
So I kind of went down the path of not taking the best advice, what people tell you to keep it simple in the beginning.
Nice.
The KISS method kind of like flew past me quite a lot.
In one ear, not the other.
So my whole goal going into drifting was to eventually do some sort of competition. So that like guided my choice on what car to start with. Because typically the easy answer or the more simple ones like the Z, a BMW, something like along those lines. But if you eventually wanted to make more power and all that, turbos, swaps, whatever. Right. So that's what turned me towards the Corvette. And like just simply having a V8 from the factory, right? And having kind of like a street race car sort of thing.
Yeah. Pre-LS swapped.
Basically, yeah. So that's what led me into getting a Corvette. And once I got that, first thing I was suggested to do was like do coilovers, do an angle kit, because like they don't really have much angle from the factory. Yeah, so
that's one of the one cars that I will say getting an angle kit up front is probably the smartest idea.
For sure. And you could keep it really simple, like with those, I think it's called a mini Mantis kit from like FDF.
Yep.
Or I know some other manufacturers actually make like cut knuckles for them, basically just move the pickup point a little bit and you could keep it simple.
Actually, you can get it on in Juku, I'm pretty sure. The Scotty D guys just came out with a C5, C6 light kit, I think is what they called it. But it's literally stock leaves and everything you can use. Wild.
The weird thing about it is like relatively simple because like you don't even need a welded diff on a Vet. Like I still have a stock diff. Like I never opened it, none of that. But I went with a full Mega Mantis kit on the front of the thing.
Fucking sweet, dude.
So yeah.
He said, "Screw the baby steps. Let's go all the angles."
Yes, immediately, and figure out what smacks what.
Yeah, for real.
So yeah, I went with Mega Mantis kit in the front, the FDF dual caliper bracket for the rear. There were simpler ways to go about that, but I kind of wanted to keep my parking brake and all that stuff.
Yeah, y'all ate Caleb alive on that one reel. He said, you do not need dual caliper. I was like, which obviously you don't. It's better to have it. Nobody's denying that. But like, y'all ate his shit on that one.
Ironically, when I drove the school cars, shout out to Reese at Evergreen Drift School, because he has like Z's and G35s and that's the sort of stuff they can run. Like, he had an inline handbrake, and I just hated the feeling of if you're pulling the handbrake coming to a stop and then you press the foot brake, it like pulls it out of your hand.
Yeah.
Which won't make a difference while you're drifting because you're never really
hardly doing
that, right? But
that was most of the people's argument in that video was the feel of it and stuff like that, which I get. But like, again, how many times are you actually doing that in the middle of the drift? If you are, that's kind of odd.
Big,
right?
Fast
like, that's a weird way to drive.
I guess. Like, the only thing I could think of would be an obvious example, like the Road Atlanta initiation in FD, where they're coming down the hill, they're on the handbrake, and then potentially use a foot brake at the same time.
Yeah, I could see that.
Which we're not doing
but
that.
That's
so.
like, yeah.
I'm not checking.
Good luck. If you drive Road Atlanta, let me fucking know. I want to come. Shit.
So, moving on from there, the rear's for the most part stock, other than coilovers, and that dual caliper bracket from FDF actually changes the pickup point for your rear toe arm, where you can actually adjust bump steer. I haven't yet, but you can.
Yeah.
And it just makes it easier to swap out the arm as well. And from there, doing those mods and like new wheels and like bigger offset and all that stuff, I ended up doing like a wide body kit on the car as well, because wide body, it's like a Z06, Z01 style fenders and quarter panels.
Oh, you kind of have to.
Yeah, because Mega Mantis
unless you're okay with the poke, you weirdo.
You want 2 to 3 inches of poke.
Yeah,
that's what you're dealing with,
dude. I've worked and worked and worked at my Mantis kit, my Mega Mantis kit, to get it to work under the stock fenders. It's so hard. I need to go down to. I'm gonna get some 225 Velinos, and hopefully that'll make it fit better.
Gotcha.
But sorry.
Eventually. On the cosmetic side was again like wide body from like stock parts basically. Put a big ass wing on it, the Big Country Labs in the back. I needed some flair to make it a little different.
I've contemplated, but the big wings just don't look right on Z's to me. Just sticking out of the trunk. Like if it's a big chassis mount wing or something, that looks nuts. But I don't know. I don't know. Z's just
you do the chassis, it looks cool, but
hot boy computer mouse. Like it's
needs some angles on it.
I'm gonna drill that in y'all's heads. I swear. The 350Zs are computer mouses. Look at it. Just look at it. Tell me that's not a computer mouse. Switch the camera to him so they can actually see what I'm pointing at.
For sure. I mean, they work. You can't argue that. But aesthetically,
well, yeah, absolutely.
Throw something on there. Maybe it would help. I don't know.
So did you didn't have a car before the Vet? correct?
Not a drift car, no. Like my first one was kind of full stupid. So
Jesus.
it was kind of scary at first because, like, it's kind of a big deal, like
Right.
quite a lot of money and all that stuff to get into it.
How much did you pay for the vet?
A little
Original.
under 20, which you got to get creative to get them that cheap, basically. Because for the
What year was it?
It's 2007, and it has.
Okay.
I had 127,000 miles when I bought it.
Right, 20 grand. I don't know what the prices are up there because I'm sure y'all deal with like salt and rust and a little bit more.
So
right?
The biggest thing I saw with the Corvettes, which you have to pay very close attention to, is when you're buying a salvaged one, is floor damage, because the Vet has like this weird concoction of fiberglass and wood as a floor. So a lot of the times when they're at salvage auction, they'll just say undercarriage damage and like somebody jumped a curb or whatever, and you can't really repair that very easily.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, even if you do repair it, it's extremely expensive to do so. So they just salvage the cars. So when you're buying one, you have to be very careful that your floor is not going to have a hole in it, basically.
Yeah, my buddy just picked one up from Copart, a C6, and it looked mangled on the trailer. I was like, bro, are you sure?
Yeah.
He's a really good car builder. Like, he's good at that's what he loves doing, is just building cars. I couldn't tell you how many times he's just sold his setup or tried selling his setup, whether it's his truck and rig to do something else or setup of his race car. He's literally selling his LS swap right now out of his Z. And I'm like,
never ends, right?
It's always something like crazy too. Like he'll sell something wild but he won't tell anyone what he's doing. So it's always like, you motherfucker, I want to know. Like, tell me. There's a reason you're selling all this shit. But
something big coming.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack you. That was just
so yeah, like when I saw them, if you go on any Facebook marketplace trying to find a Corvette, they're always the notorious one of one kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like I saw them because like they put some like a mini Mantis kit on them or like some drift parts. Mm-hmm. They're still asking like $25,000 for these cars, even though they have salvage titles. And I even saw one that the floor wasn't even fixed, but he still wanted 20 grand for it. So,
good God.
When I'm saying like it's kind of creative to get one under 20, it's like you got to know some people and it has to be like in pretty rough condition, which was the case with mine. So I lucked out a little bit where like the power steering rack was leaking and that sort of thing. So in the process of repairing that, I already got like an upgrade from, I think it was like Turn 1 or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Where they like rebuild the power steering rack and like take out one of the it's like a D10, I think, that acts as a restrictor on the return lines. Okay. So for drifting, when you're whipping the wheel around and all that stuff, it kind of like reduces flow. So in that process, I already got that upgraded and, power steering pump and whatnot. But a lot of it was like maintenance stuff, power steering pump, water pump. I ended up upgrading the radiator for it as well, because one of the big issues that I've run into is heat management with these things. Because over the past weekend, 80-something degree weather, I do a lap and my water temps are going up like 20 degrees. And
that's what I fight on the RV, damn it.
And I did everything that everybody recommends so far, where it's like, again, upgrading water pump, go a bigger radiator, get dual fans, lower thermostat, hood vents, oil cooler, fan on the oil cooler, put everything on switches, and I'm still running into this. But
good God.
I did find out this week that my fans are only seeing the half of the voltage that they're supposed to be. So
that's no fun.
No. So turns out that when I bought this fan and radiator assembly basically, which wasn't cheap whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the way that it was wired, they wired both fans in series. So basically you take your stock harness and just split it for the two fans. So now instead of getting 12 volts on each fan, you're getting 6. So technically you're running at half of the speed that they're supposed to be running at.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I wasn't
They make
happy.
them that way?
Apparently.
Who?
DeWitt's. It was a plug-and-play radiator system that was like $1,300.
That sounds dumb. There's got to be a reason for that, though.
Well, the only thing I could come up with was these fans aren't there. They're from Spalt, right? Uh-huh. So they're radiator manufacturers. So maybe they outsource, make the shroud and the fans that work with our radiator. So they just sell it as a package, but they're not
that's
fan
fair.
guys,
I didn't think about that.
So what's in the works right now that I have the parts in order and all that is 2 harnesses to be able to wire the fans on their own individual harnesses with relays and fuses and all that stuff. And actually, DeWitz was helping me with adding a temperature switch to my system. So like, you basically take a hose, cut it in half, you add this adapter, and it has like a little fitting that you could put a 3/8 NPT sensor into it.
So you're still on stock ECU, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Not tuned, nothing. Like, all the mods that I've done around the motor is reliability, basically. Because
smart.
like, while I had the power steering rack out, which you have to drop the subframe to get out on a vet. Not fun.
Yeah.
I also did like the crank pulley, and I did like a 10% underdrive because supposedly that would help at high RPMs and not like kill everything else. One of the ATI super dampers, basically.
Yeah.
The torque spec on that is fun. It's like 240 foot-pounds.
Oh, fuck no.
Like the whole motor shifts as you're trying to like torque this bolt. It's like,
dude, speaking of torque wrenches, this I think Precision Built is the name of the company. I don't know. They hit me up randomly and like just said, "Hey, we like what you do. We're gonna send you a torque wrench. Just pick one on the website." I was like, "What the fuck? This has got to be a scam." So I was like, "All right, I'll pick one anyways." It's actually nice. It's a dual head and stuff too. So I've got 3/8 drive on one side and 1/2 inch on the other. It's got the lockout and everything. I'm like, bro, I've never even heard of these motherfuckers. This is a nice ass torque wrench.
Hell yeah! Like,
so I'll show you it after when we can go out there.
I think that's something that a lot of like. I think a lot of people overlook actually torquing stuff properly.
Dude, yeah.
And I ran into this issue myself with like, a teething issue, I guess, of building a car, right? Where
have a wheel fly off?
No, almost.
Seen that plenty of times.
It stayed attached, but it wasn't pointing in the right direction.
Oh, what the fuck?
So, like, everybody that sells an angle kit that's on solid bearings, not bearings, Heim joints and all that stuff says like you got to double check your torque specs and all that kind of stuff. Make sure everything, do nut and bolt checks. And actually going off of, I think it was a Denofa video where he gets like 2 adjustable wrenches and like goes over every bolt. And so like I started doing that. Turns out like a lot of the torque specs on FDF, for an example, are ridiculously high. So just the tie rod bolt is like 105 foot-pounds, which that's more than your lug nuts, right?
Yeah.
And your small adjustable wrench.
Mine came loose. I'm pretty sure I bent the rack because I was on the big track at CMP. That was my dumbass mistake. But
most of the stuff there, like the smooth adjusters on there, they all need over 100 foot-pounds of torque to make sure they're properly tight.
So wild.
So I think that's why from, working on cars, like, you think you know what tight is, but apparently for this stuff, it's nowhere near as tight.
No.
So good thing to have is like a torque wrench and actually look up what they recommend torquing stuff to, because
that's just good practice too. Do your bolt checks.
Don't
be me. Again, I always say that. I'm always seem to be saying, don't be me. Seriously, don't be me. I
did it too.
I have a bad habit of just trying things on my own though, and not asking beforehand. Like, what should I look out for? So that's my fault.
I had to pay a tow truck $400 to take me home to realize like the bolts aren't torqued enough.
Hell yeah! Cheers to that.
So
I ran over my bumper one time. I don't even know what bumper it was. But it was when I bought the Z originally, and it was this like really thick poly kind of material. It was somewhat flexible, but it was heavy as fuck. And like people talk about KBD being heavy. This bumper was heavy as fuck. Like twice the weight of my KBD front bumper, which KBD is not heavy. Grow up. Brace your bumpers. It's better. So
more airflow too.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck you. No. I'm trying to stop cussing. I gotta stop cussing on this podcast. But no, I had the bumper just sitting on there because it was my car was at my buddy's house and I was driving it back to my house. Not so legally, but I didn't bolt the bumper in or zip tie the corners or anything. And I was driving down the road, hit one little bump, and
I just ate it.
I was like, "Oh shit!" Pull over and trying to yank my bumper out from under, and the whole front of it scratched to hell. Oh, that was a bad time.
Not fun.
Yeah,
get like stuck like that, but
don't be me.
So. Yeah, going back to like all the mods of the car. So other than suspension, like I was mentioning, and then some reliability stuff, like trying to deal with heat management and all that, moving like onto the interior, cars caged and bucket seats, harnesses, quick release steering wheel, which I use half the time.
Yeah.
A handbrake, right? But actually, one of the cool things on the Vets, they actually have, if you go to like the digital display, they actually give you an oil temperature as well. So like you can monitor your water and oil temperature separately.
That's sick.
So that also led me to buying an oil cooler to add to the system too, because like I'd had times, especially the first few times I drove the car, where like water temps seemed like they were okay, but like oil temps are still like 240s, which that's pretty cooking.
I
right?
wish I need an oil temp on my car. And yeah,
I've had friends that tell me like their stuff doesn't go high at all, which I get granted because my fans aren't working properly. Maybe that's the big reason why.
RB's full of overheating issues.
Oh, gotcha.
So like, I should have one on there, but like the biggest problem is because where the oil filter goes on an RB, there's what would be a factory oil cooler, which just basically circulates
water around
antifreeze around the oil galleries right there that go into the filter, which when you're racing and shit just makes it hotter.
Gotcha.
So you take that off, the oil filter will actually just bolt up to the block same way. So you just run it that way, and that solves a lot of your overheating issues. Not all of it, please, for the love of God. But watch it. But yeah, so it helps a little bit. But like my radiator setup and all that, my fan shroud, I've got one 15-inch fan. It's not the greatest. Like, so again, don't be me. Whatever. Dude, this is gonna be an episode full of me just saying that.
Well, it's one of those things too, because people give you advice and all that stuff, and like I want to hope that I listen to it for the most part. Like, again,
what advice for me? Who the fuck's running an RV like that, and especially in a Z? So it's like, who do I ask?
But like the DeWitt's radiator and the oil coolers and all that stuff, that's like what everybody was recommending me to do. Luckily, like for the LS, there was actually, or in my case, an LS2, there was actually like a plug and play oil, like it's a fitting basically that goes on the oil filter housing. Right. But then you run two lines of thermostat and all that stuff to oil cooler. So that helped a bit, but still, for now, going into the summer, while I was driving in the winter, it was fine. And if anything, I did a cool down lap and everything's good. But
I do have an oil cooler. I just want to preface that. I had the same thing with the sandwich plate, with the AN lines going to the oil cooler. I have that.
But one of the things that I kind of held off on in the beginning was even doing a steering wheel, because Corvette steering wheel is not really much on it, but it's leather and it's slippery as hell. I found myself actually like sticking my fingers in the spokes to like hold it from spinning like out of my hand, which,
and most factory steering wheels are like they'll actually like
move
they're
up and
not
down.
centered. You know what I mean? So it's very weird, especially when you're watching in-car footage. Oh my God.
I don't
hate it.
I don't recall if the Corvette, not that I felt or noticed in videos, it was more like, especially if you're wearing gloves, it would just slip through your hands way more than what you wanted it to, which sometimes would get sketchy. And also, before I even upgraded to the harnesses, the factory seatbelt, even with the bucket seat, was not enough to like keep me in the seat. I know a lot of people say like that's a big mod to do and all that stuff, but I think along with that, having proper harnesses to keep you from wiggling.
I agree. Absolutely. But if you don't have the money, go for the bucket seat more than anything. Because I ran a whole season, if not 2 seasons, with bucket seat and factory belts. And that made a tremendous difference in my driving alone.
I had a oh shit moment, like coming off the bank in Englishtown. Like you
get a bunch of fun tracks. That's different. I get that.
Well, what I ran into was like I didn't like ease off the throttle very much. I like kind of like let go in one shot, and as the car gripped up, I shook inside the car and did that with the steering wheel next to the wall. Like that was sketchy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's why after that I'm like, I need to help myself in this thing a little bit better, because that you don't want to, as you stop drifting, crash. It'd be pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. Like, don't do that.
So yeah, from there, like, your safety stuff, like fire extinguisher and stuff like that, to run it, like Club Loose, for example. but I'd like to try to believe that the car is simple because I didn't have to like take, other than like maintenance stuff, which might not be as simple, like I said, the power steering rack situation, but not having to weld diffs or anything like that. The motor's fine, the transmission's fine, like powertrain.
It's very insane the appeal Corvettes have on people. Like I was just saying, the dude that just bought one off Copart and he's selling his whole LS swap. I assume it's to build a Corvette. That's my guess. But I have another buddy that actually, how you were just saying, it's hard to find a Corvette under 20 grand. He used to have one that was already set up, PBM angle kit, front end, like all of it. It was a full on drift car. I bought it for like 15 or 16 grand in Texas.
Gotcha.
I think it was at 06. Or no, maybe it was at 07. Somewhere around there. But yeah, so he bought that and then ended up getting rid of it and getting into razors. Getting mad about that and getting back into drifting. Now he has like a glass top S197 that's like really fucking nice.
Okay.
That he got off Copart. And he drifts that and he's selling that motherfucker because he wants a Corvette again. It's crazy the appeal that especially C6s have to drifters.
So when you actually sit in a Corvette and you're next to a Z and you're looking up at the driver, you kind of get that like, this is a race car feeling. It also hurts when you get in and out of it because you're sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, that's
I got
not
back
fun.
problems, dog. It sucks.
Yeah. But like, you could definitely go C5. I personally am not a big fan of pop-up headlights unless it's an RX-7. So,
yeah, the C5s don't look right to me.
But underneath, they're the same. Like, granted, you're getting LS1 versus 2 or 3 or 7. But suspension-wise, it's the same thing. So if you do cam and whatever on an LS1, you're probably making more power than I do stock. So
yeah,
like you can get into it considerably cheaper than a C6. And also like on the C6s, the 5 to 7s I think are a bit cheaper because they come with the LS2 still instead of the 6.2 LS3. So like you get 30 more horsepower, whatever it is, for just a year later.
Yeah.
Supposedly better flowing heads and intake and yada yada yada. But if you're going to do like aftermarket anything, you could put apparently LS3 heads on an LS2 and get that better flowing ports and so on if you really want to. I don't really think you need it too much because this was like kind of a hard thing to understand and almost hard pill to swallow in a sense, which was what people say, like starting with low power cars to start drifting. And essentially what they're saying is like momentum drifting versus like powering through your run, right? And what I was running into with that was like, at Englishtown is a really easy example where your initiation, you're usually...
The road course?
Yes.
Okay.
You're usually initiating over 60 miles an hour to get to the zone. And the first few times I'm like 40s, maybe 50s. And what I would end up doing is like, instead of starting at the beginning of the zone because I'm slowing down to get to that zone and using the power then to like stop me almost, I was coming up short because I was going too slow and then using the power to get up the hill. Where if you had a lesser horsepower car, you're not making it, basically.
Yeah, there's no fucking way.
So
you have to use momentum.
That was something that didn't click to me. And granted, you could like rip up a like Corvette to the point where it feels like that too. The problem there is now you're going a lot faster than you probably want to, and it's like your reaction times have to be faster. And if you're not used to it, it's like it was actually like really eye-opening the first time I even got into a Corvette because they do not want to stay sideways compared to a Z.
No.
So, like, you have to really, like, stay committed with it. Like, for a new guy, stay committed. For probably anybody that has a few years of experience, it's probably easy, right?
Right.
But what kept happening is, like, the thing would keep gripping up, and then you just gain a shitload of speed, because now you're going straight at full throttle instead of sideways. So that puts you in.
Do you wish you had started in a lower horsepower car to learn that?
No.
From the beginning? No?
Well, potentially, but if I kind of like went back to when I bought my first motorcycle, where everybody says like buy a 600 because like don't get a bigger bike, blah, 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 you're going to hurt yourself. And like my thought process behind that is like it only goes fast if I wanted to, right? You cannot accelerate as much as you need to, right? So I kind of took that approach, which in my mind translated well, but not really because again, the grip level, it's like, it's better suited to go faster in general, which doesn't really help you when you're drifting because you want to be smooth and easy, and like the consumable parts become harder, basically.
Well, yeah, of course.
Like
Comes
just
more.
Yeah, like this past weekend, I was running on like a cheaper Walmart tire.
That was actually one of my next questions. Like when you first started, what tires were you running?
265 Kendas, Vesda or UHP, I think is the model. And I drove on those all the way up until like my ambition, like I mentioned before, like to do a competition eventually. So I have the 235 Gambler series, 35 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start using those tires to see like difference, how it feels and all that. Ironically, I didn't really notice much of a difference, which probably says more about me than anything else. But now I'm like, I hop between basically a 265 to a 235. Like the 235 is just like kind of easier to drift on because grip.
Well, yeah.
You can.
What PSI are you running them at?
20s, sometimes less than that. Like this past weekend,
I like a grippy setup. So I've always ran like 245, 255, more around there. Even when I had factory VQ in the car.
Okay. Like that was actually a big thing. The first few times I drove the car, I was maybe at 30 PSI, 32, somewhere around there in the rear. And after having a few sessions with the car, I actually had Reese come out again to me at that point because I had my car and it was like closer to him for him to come to Englishtown too. And he started giving me some instructions just on their car track. And a lot of that was like car setup, which like what tire pressure to run, like what suspension, like settings to run on your coilovers. Yeah. So like I didn't know that I had too little grip in the rear, and that's why when I initiated, I'd like float for 2 hours and then still go off track. Again, car track, so you're not really off track, but you're out of the lines. So then from there, I started running 25s, maybe 22s, depending on. This past weekend was the first time I drove that was actually really hot out. So I was anywhere from 19 to 22, depending. And I was trying, this is Westlake tires that I got off of Walmart. They were on sale pretty cheap. They were like $84 for, it was a 265 4018 for $84. I'm like,
I've seen people use those and God bless, they just delaminate and shit.
I didn't have that issue. Like,
really?
Compared to
especially at that heat temperature?
You dunk them in water every lap too. Like it wasn't really hot lapping because just had East Coast Bash where it was like 40 drivers per group was what they limited to. So like you're on grid for a while, right?
Yeah.
So you had plenty of time for the tires to cool off and all that stuff. And again, water pit. So I didn't really notice too much of a grip difference going from like a 235 Canada to a 265 Westlake. The big difference that I noticed, I would roast them in like 6 to 8 laps, and they were gone. Like when I say gone, like I'm driving through the pits and everybody's looking at me because I'm picking up all the rocks because they're just like goop.
Yep.
I was also getting
if you're getting into drifting, pay attention to that. Don't buy the cheap tires. You'll just run through them and you'll be pissed at yourself.
So I think on a potentially lower horsepower car, they might have fared better. But when you start, throwing more angle and trying to go faster and all that kind of stuff, it's
to me, you might as well just, because you're not going to be using a lot of the tire anyways. So I would rather it relate to what I'll be comfortable with when I finally know how to drive. And then they're not going to wear down because they're good tires.
Yeah.
So you just run those until you figure it out.
It's like that trade-off too, because you're also comparing like a Kenda, which is like a summer tire or a sport tire, right, to an all season. So
even Valino's new episode tire.
Haven't tried those yet. I'm excited
to.
I think I have 8 Valinos at home at the moment. But
I think this week I'm gonna order some because I need some for the Immersion Motorsports event in Texas.
So for us, they're really hard to find to get. Like when I even try to, I contacted Valino directly to see if I can get some tires directly from them, but like shipping isn't cheap because they're coming out of Texas. So like to make the most sense, it's like order 20 of them. So that's a factor there too. And then for that, excuse me, for the 235 class, a lot of guys were running I think it's the Valina 08C, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the grippier ones before you get into like the R's. And like everybody wants those because those are like the grippiest tire to run in that class, right?
Right.
So I have like 6 of those that are like tucked away for eventually.
We make it to the top 4.
Well, like eventually when I hopefully do run a comp, like I have, because that's the biggest thing, right? Like you can have the best car in the world. If your tires are crap, you're not really going nowhere, right? So those eventually I'll use for that. But in the meantime, again, since I'm fairly new, I'm still experimenting with different things. Like the Kendas, the Kendas have been great. Like they last long when they. I don't know. I didn't like do a test back to back to like feel like how I'm driving now because I want to hope that I'm progressing. So I'd wear tires out faster. So it wouldn't be a fair comparison to say like I did a whole session on a Kenda before, and after I don't know how many track days now I'm on a different tire and it's like not lasting as long, right? So the fair thing would, you know, go back to back, same tire size and all that stuff, right? Which I don't really doubt that the Kenda would last longer just because the compound in general. And even the Kendas as well, like they would just get to the point where there's no grip, and when you feel that, it's like, yeah, it's time to change tires. So it's like very predictable the whole time you're driving. It's not like when they get really hot they change, which was a thing with the
they're very consistent.
Absolutely,
I will say that,
that was the thing that I was running into the West Lakes where I would like do a full lap on the road course, and then when you would get to tree turn, it's basically the full send turn if you're not really familiar with Englishtown. And like I would rose through that thing like on limiter, and then it comes to like a very tight hairpin, and I couldn't touch the throttle anymore, else I would spin. Like they were that slippery. Like it was
my cheap
bad.
tire was always Milestars.
Okay, never tried those.
Yeah, they were more common back whenever I was first starting, and they honestly weren't horrible on the Z's. You would deal with some delamination issues and like roasting through them once you got better stuff. So yeah, I feel you. I've just seen people with the Westlakes and they're exact same story. Roasting through them.
The important part to think about on that too, it's like you might be saving some money on a tire, even say it didn't last as long as say a Kenda or a Velina, whatever, and you're saving a few dollars, but how much time does it take to put tires on and off rims, which nobody enjoys doing. So
I fucking hate it.
And none of these tires are really easy to mount on rims either because the sidewalls are pretty low. So granted, the Westlake is a little bit softer than a Kenda or a Velino, but they're still, you know, still not the easiest thing to mount. It's not like a 250 or 50 sidewall or anything like that. So that's a big factor you got to keep in mind. If you enjoy changing tires, maybe run a cheaper tire, even if it lasts 10% less, but it's 30% less cost. It
better
might
be bringing
sense.
a tire machine with you. Shit.
That was actually a big thing with.
But if you got that much money, you might as well just be buying fucking good tires.
Send it.
Jesus.
That was something that I even compared from the Velinos. Again, I haven't driven on the Velinos, but just measuring tread depth from the Velino to the Kenda. The Velino does have a deeper tread than the Kenda does.
Yeah.
So
even in I saw in Jimmy's video the other day, he had some Velinos he was putting on. What car was that? I think it's the front street car he's building. Anyways, I don't know, but he was like, dude, this tire, it just looks massive. It looks bigger, even though it's just a normal 235, 40 or whatever. It looks bigger than the Acceleras that he usually ran or whatever. And you can like see it.
Like if I didn't take it like a gauge to it to measure, but I don't know, it was like a penny or whatever it was. And like you do get a few thousands more like thickness of the tread on a Velino than you do to a Kenda.
That's crazy.
I mean, they do cost more. So like take that into consideration that just because something costs less than the other doesn't mean they're exactly the same thing, even if it's the same size and all that stuff, right? I can't speak to like how long they last because I haven't driven on them either yet. But
Velino is a fairly small company here in the U.S. Like, there's not very many employees there.
One guy, as far as I know.
Literally, I think he has some help. I can't remember.
I
don't know. I was talking to him, and like literally, he has his day job, and he only answers Velino emails in the afternoon, like past 6 o'clock, because that's the only time he has to actually dedicate to Velino. So, shout out to you, bro.
Yeah, hell yeah.
You're awesome.
The owner, the Japanese owner of Velino, comes to Englishtown like kind of hard to miss
So
him
sick.
too. I have never met him, never spoke to him, but I know they order like containers of tires to over there every now and again. But especially for that series, like to get 235s right now is kind of tough. So that's something that I never considered getting into drifting is the whole tire, like getting tires, disposing tires, mounting tires, like how much of a hassle that actually
Dude,
is.
it sucks. That's why I've got fucking tires just sitting out back. Do we all do it? Don't come for me either. We all do it.
You got to find that local dump that you could throw a tire in every
Every
once in a-
fucking local dump around here is like you get 4 tires max that you can bring. I'm like, screw all of you.
Just went through 10 the past weekend.
Yeah.
What do I do with
Okay, well, we'll just jump off the tire thing. What wheels do you run on your car?
Stage Monroe's or
Monroe's. Okay.
18 by 9s, I believe, plus 12s. So I run the same wheel all around.
Just curious, what made you get those?
So it was to be able to run from a 235 to a 265 tire. Like that's why I chose that size. The reason why I went with that brand was influence off of the Reese, basically.
Oh,
Like,
okay. Yeah.
I was never
Gotta get you on some Kansei's.
honestly, I was never like, again, the stand stuff or like the visual stuff of the car. I was more leaning to like form follows the function, but I wanted something to kind of like contrast.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Don't get your panties in a wad.
Like probably hot take, I guess. I never understood the stance thing. Like,
Yeah,
do
that's
what
where I
you-
came from. So like, and still to this day, I don't understand it either. I don't know why we did it, but it's cool. I want a stance car again. I think that's what the FC will end up being. But
it's one of those things where like you put on airbags and you can actually drive it, like lift it up and drive it off the lot. But when I was at like a car event at
even on
English Town,
bags, some of those cars are not very drivable. Yeah, you know.
I was sitting at like the end of an event at English Town and they had a car show rolling out, and the noise that these cars made is like nails on chalkboard, every single one of them.
Yeah.
They're grinding something.
Fucking right, son. But you look at every single one of those drivers and they're like,
They're happy
yeah,
as shit."
baby.
And they're all having a blast, like blasting music and whatever, like the stereo system still a thing. The whole Fast and Furious days.
I never could do that. I get headaches from that shit. A lot of bass and stuff. It just doesn't.
They're throwing a party in the parking lot with these cars blasting.
I'm
I'm
sure.
having a great time. Like, I can't fault them for that. It's just not really something that I don't even have a radio in my car right now. Like, I took everything out. Which
I want to put a sound bar in mine. I don't want to fuck with a radio. If I could just put a wire up a
Absolutely,
sound
dude.
bar and literally bolt it to the roof
Put it in your-
behind the seats.
in a
Absolutely,
roll- yeah.
dude. Roll. I don't have a roll cage, but roll
Same
cage
idea,
mount.
yeah.
That'd be fucking sick. Tell me I'm wrong.
I feel jealous sometimes when you're sitting on grid just bored and like the guy next to
Yeah,
you is
just
like blasting
straight
music and-
Bluetooth, bro. Like easy. It'd be cool to have like, I don't know. It makes no sense, but having like an Apple CarPlay touchscreen radio
But,
in a drift car is really cool to me. I want that.
Small Bluetooth speaker.
Makes no sense though.
Like, send it. No.
Yeah. I know a dude that did boat audio in his car, and it's the loudest
Gets
audio
heavy,
system
though,
I've
too.
ever heard in a car. It's
Like-
ridiculous.
That was one of the things I was trying to do in my car, was like trying to reduce as much weight as possible because, tire life as well.
Yeah.
Not only on the performance side, like you're going to go fast and all that stuff, but like look at Denofa with his Fox, right?
Mhm.
That thing with enough wind might blow over. So it was like 2,200 pounds or whatever. it
Yeah.
is. Like I wish my vent was that white. That'd be
Light as a
awesome.
feather.
It feels like you have 600 horsepower probably with 400. But it would have been nice to maintain some kind of sound systems. Again, when you're on grid, it's kind of boring. Everybody, you can't talk to each other because it's so loud anyway.
Mhm.
So, but
That was one thing that even with the VQ in it, and, like, my car wasn't loud, but like, even when you're driving, you can't hear any of it. And I would find myself not even focused on the music when I'm sitting on grid, anyways. But it was because I was learning to, so I was like,
nervous and shit.
nervous fucking wreck on grid. But
One
Yeah,
of the
I don't know.
things that drove me nuts this past weekend was like there was somebody on grid that his car kept like surging So it'd like be idling and then it sounded like it was going to shut off every 3 seconds and it just kept doing this.
Like like a cyclic idle. I have that on the RB.
Guess.
Where literally I can it's all in the ECU. But I can rev the car over 3,500. Shout out Jay Glasgow for putting this on the tune. Rev it over 3,500 if I'm over, I think it's 170 water temp. And it'll do a cyclic idle where it sounds like it has a mean ass cam almost.
But I don't know. This thing
basically shuts off a couple of the cylinders and lets the engine cool down a little bit.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. One of my buddies was like, "Yeah, I'm getting off track. This is gonna give me brain dead." Like somebody went off track or broke whatever, so we're just sitting there for 15 minutes waiting for the to get cleared, and you're just listening, wow, and like just doing this over and over again.
That's probably what it was. I don't understand how it works. So like, if anyone tunes, like, I guess I could just ask Jay, but like, I don't know. I don't understand tuning. I don't understand wiring. Why we got wiring specialties helping us out? Screw that.
Yeah, the wiring isn't exactly fun. Just kind of part of it. I just had to wire some fans to my car for the oil cooler, which.
So do you have plans of like doing crazy stuff to this car? I mean, I know you understand like you're still learning a little bit right now, but like, is that the goal?
Kind of like the reason why I kind of started going down the drifting path was it was still like the coolest cars that you could have basically to me. So like when you see kind of the RTRs and that sort of thing on the unobtainable level, right? But like a lot of those cars are still like garage built. So, when I looked at like what's the most badass car that I could have and drive and still enjoy, like that's where drifting kind of like filled in that gap. And the reality of it is like, yeah, do I want like a Pro-Am style car? Absolutely. Does they cost a lot of money? Can you even justify having that to drive at a local event? Probably not.
Yeah.
Unless you're running like that Gambler, the Unlimited series where they're running bigger tires and all that kind of stuff, right? Because the reality of that too, it's like, it's easy to shop for like nice parts, whereas it's heads, cams, whatever, and try to make horsepower. And then when you go shop for tires, you're like, I don't want to spend this money because it goes up in smoke, right? Like you want to have the nice thing you can keep looking at.
More power, more problems.
Pretty much. And then what I was even mentioning before, like with those Westlake tires, when I had, I think, 2 sessions that I had to come off track to change tires, like adding power is just going to make that worse, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, especially on a Corvette, since the drivetrain on those things are not easy to work on. If you start breaking axles or drive shafts or anything like that, it's a nightmare to change.
So you'll probably be one to go. Well, I guess you already kind of are the reliability stuff, but the efficiency aspect of the car more, and like how body panels come off, and like
trying to make it simpler. Absolutely, like
that's probably what you'll focus on first.
One thing was like trying to get as much weight out of the car as I possibly can to try to reduce consumables too. And then the other thing is like, trying to simplify it as much as possible as well.
We'll get the harness then. Get your wiring specialties harness. That's what I gotta say.
Because to be able to like unplug stuff easily instead of
they're labeled. It's dummy proof. I swear. Like, not only can you customize every little aspect of the harness, especially on the website, it's literally a catalog on the side where you pick all of your certain injectors, ECU, like everything. But it's fucking labeled, bro. Yeah. Every single connector right below it on the wire has a label telling you exactly where it goes. You can't fuck it up.
That's a big deal, I think, even for resale value too, because like, who wants to pick up some project from somebody else that's just spaghetti under the hood?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know which way to start if everything's labeled.
There's a wiring specialties harness somewhere around here for an RB25 on Facebook Marketplace, and it's like retail price.
It's worth something.
Because it's fucking worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Because like even motor-wise, potentially like at the end of the season, like do a refresh, potentially like do lifters and maybe a cam at that point or something like that. But like keeping it as simple as possible would probably be the best way to go, especially for my intention, because if to run that 235 class, this guy's running stock BMWs in it. Like I don't really need more car to do it, and sorting out just keeping temperatures in check would be way more of a priority at the moment than trying to add more power to the car at all.
That's true. Yeah.
And my current project is like actually removing the air conditioning out of the car. One of the big factors for that was like trying to run it on grid just made the car overheat like crazy. and then trying to get more airflow through the radiator. Because like if I had to run 2 laps back to back, my car would have overheated. Like if I'm already at 240 temps after 1 lap, there's no way I'm running a second one, right? So cool shirt's on the way for that.
Nice.
It's kind of harsh. Like 80, 90 degrees, it's humid as hell, and you're in the car. It's like it's not a fun place to be.
Absolutely not.
I'd
love to have one. Mr. Cool, hit me up.
I didn't get the brand Cool shirt themselves. It's like a cool chill system, whatever. It's it's different manufacturer, but same concept. Ice through water.
I really have no need for it. That's just a joke, honestly. Like, I don't do competition. Like, my car doesn't get. I wouldn't say it gets that hot inside. I'm not driving that much or sitting in the car that much. I just run.
No, this is like local grassroots events that I'm talking about. Like I was just at East Coast Bash. We had over the weekend, it was like 5 sessions. Each session's about an hour and 15 minutes. And, or at least for B group, that's what it was. And you're going out at noon and you're sitting in your car from like noon to 1:15. Like you're cooking basically.
I'm always one that'll come off grid and like chill for a little bit, even during the session. Just cause like I truly enjoy being at the event.
For sure, yeah.
Not
like,
just the driving.
That was something that kind of took me by surprise like the community around the event. Because I went into this, like, I had somewhat of a mentor with an instructor, right? But he's not holding my hand while I'm there. I saw him chat, that sort of thing. But, like, how quickly I started meeting people that are very like-minded, and we all know what it feels like to be in a driveway at 1 a.m. working on your car. So, like, the effort that it takes to even get to the track, it kind of, like, I think creates that, like, camaraderie almost, where we all know how much it sucks to be able to then have that fun. And it, like, seems like it brings everybody together really fast. And I had multiple people like, hey, try this, do that. Like, if I'm having issues with line, like, one of my big things was, like, getting the initiation down correctly on the road course at Englishtown. And multiple people's like, try this, try that. Like, small little things that you don't have to try all of it, but, like, baby steps did improve.
What was the best advice you got from all of that? That's probably a hard one.
The best way to judge your initiation speed is how much your butt puckers, basically. And
yeah, I can see that.
It's like, because the initiation on the road course was like you're aiming at a tire wall before you pull the handbrake, basically.
Yeah.
So, like,
I would say if you think you're going fast enough, just go a little bit faster.
Because it's one of those things, like what I mentioned before, even with the momentum drift versus using the power. Since I was able to use the power, like, I thought I was doing it fine. But then I actually did a clinic where multiple people were telling me the same thing. It's like, you have to go faster because you can always scrub speed relatively easily, but you can't gain speed really fast.
Now, in your case, you still had the power to, like, be able to still stay in drift. Like, with a Z or something like that, you'll literally just spin out.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, you're going so slow. Like, if you're new and you just started drifting and you keep spinning out and wondering why, that's probably why. You're not going fast enough and you don't have enough momentum to carry you through the part where you don't have enough power. So go faster. The momentum will keep you going, and you'll realize that you can actually control the car. It'll stay sideways rather than going out of control.
Like, on the technical side of that too, it's like the faster you're going, the wheel speed to your actual speed is going to be smaller, right?
Right.
So once you dump the clutch because, like, you're in no shit moment or whatever, it's not overspinning the car too, and you won't spin out as well. Don't get me wrong, I went into the grass a few times backwards on initiation because I overdid it, right? But, like,
the angle for it too.
I was like, panic, hit the brakes.
That's another thing. I didn't have I had fucking the bump stops taken out, and that was it. Like, I didn't have any angle. But the Z's have okay angle from the factory.
My situation with that was more like I went too fast. I'm like, I'm not making this turn, and as soon as I touched the foot brake, I just looped it, basically.
Yeah.
It was more of like panic kind of thing than it was trying to save it at that point, but
scared, hit the foot brake, and then you stomp on the gas, and it's just woof.
No, I didn't get back on the gas. I just went into the dirt backwards, and all the dirt went into the car, and it was a good time. But that was a big factor too, like, just the fact of having people that will actually give you encouragement and help you, because, like, a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So, like, having somebody outside, like, do this, do that, do whatever, especially if they're experienced, was a big deal to help you progress too, at least for me so far. Not only because when it comes to the instruction, like, you literally have the instructor in the car with you one-on-one. So
See, that's one thing I never did have. Like, even when I started, beginner days and like these drift schools weren't really a thing. And it's not that long ago when I started drifting. Like, I think it was maybe 5 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay.
So like 5 or 6, something like that. But yeah, like we never really had that. So I've literally never been to a beginner day. I've never had an instructor in the car. I've never had any of that. So, and I suck at sim. So like I never had the sim to fall on either to teach me. So it's so cool, I will say, to see all of the different tools we have now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's one of those things when you're spending money to practice, minimizing how much you need to practice is always great, right? Or
the cost of
what everybody calls seat time, right? So if you can take somebody that has 15, 20 years of experience and tell them you do this instead of that because they've done it both ways,
fucking wish.
It's huge. A lot of it was, again, like trial and error on the sim, but there are like some inherent bad habits that you might take from the sim to real world if you don't apply it correctly. And actually a very easy example of that was same thing, that case I was saying of initiating on the road course at Englishtown, where when you're in the sim, you just 2 and 3 of your buddies are sending it from the other side of the track and top of third.
Right.
Like, we're sending it and we make it, right? You're never doing that in real life, right? Yeah. So actually getting the line correct was not something that I ever focused on until I actually started driving in real life. Mm-hmm. So you almost have to like reverse it to where when you actually have a car and you're going back to the sim, it's like set it up to do what your car actually does and treat it the same way, where you're not resetting because, I got the line wrong a little bit, and not chucking it against the wall because you know you can, kind of thing. You have to change your mindset quite a lot when it comes to that, where I think one of the biggest helps was like chasing. I've only done a few laps so far chasing other cars, but from so many hours on the sim, like, you know what to do when it comes to like throttle, clutch.
Now, you said you had like what, 1,800 hours or some shit on the sim?
Check this week is at 21 already. Yeah.
Okay. So like because I don't have a sim, obviously, and I suck at it, so I don't even understand the concept of hours. Like what does an hour of sim racing equate to?
It's literally
like just being on the sim for an hour.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so like, what about the times that the sim's just like sitting there on and you're not even driving? Like, do people is that still equated into that factor? Because I feel like some people just be overplaying their hours, and it's almost like a flex thing now.
Yeah, so that's just a Steam thing. So like, if you leave a game open, it will continue to count your hours. So yeah, you could.
Some of y'all be fooling. We got you now.
You absolutely could like fake your hours too, but like, again, I've been on the sim from 2019.
Okay.
So like, and it's something that I do on a very regular basis, and it wasn't only just on Assetto too, because like I did other titles like iRacing and other like Formula One and stuff. So yeah, especially considering I had it during COVID, most of it probably came during that time too.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, whenever you like, I guess, got the sim, what were you looking for? Like, did you even know what to get?
So at the time, there wasn't that much offering like there is today. Like, again,
I'm sure
during that 2020 to 22, maybe, the amount of new sim stuff that came out.
Fanatec was that was like
Thrustmaster,
all that was known.
Yeah, Fanatec and Simicube.
Thrustmaster, I forgot about that.
So Fanatec and Simicube at the time were the only ones that actually made direct drive wheels. So I wanted to go with the direct drive at the time because that was supposedly what would translate the best to real life. And I got a DD1 at the time, and I used that for maybe 2 years. I ran into some issues, like software issues with them, and ended up changing to a Simicube, where there is some pitfalls when it comes to like trying to buy direct drive wheels specifically, which is the torque specs that they sell, because like that's the big advertising figure that everybody talks about. It's like this motor puts out 10 or 20 or 30 Newton meters, right? My current wheel I think does 30 or 32, and you use maybe 40% of it at the most. Like if you put that at 100%, your wrists are coming off. Like
I've heard that. Yeah.
There's no chance whatsoever. So I think companies use that a lot to try to sell them, almost like horsepower on a car instead of like torque figure. But the big important part of it was, as far as I heard, was like the fidelity of and the resolution that the motor can actually produce. So like how detailed it actually feels. Like if you're going over a rumble strip, is it actually like feel like a rumble strip, or is it just everything's going kind of haywire? You know,
I bet you have to have that extent of it to be able to make it feel more accurate at the lower end. Because so like if it goes up to 100% and you run it at say 20 or whatever, 20 or 30. I feel like the efficiency of it would be 10 times better since it can go to that scale, but at 20, 30%, it would make things feel a little bit more realistic. Again, know nothing about Sims, so don't come after me.
So like the torque figures when it came from like the Fanatec to the SimiCube, the SimiCube was higher. However, even on the Fanatec, I was using 50% maybe, while on the SimiCube I'm using 45 or 40, whatever it is. So they still are way overrated for what you're actually using, but then how it felt from the SimiCube felt way better. So I don't know if what you're saying, like turning it down makes it feel better. I don't really think it was just like a better quality, either controllers for the motor or the motor itself. I'm not really sure. So I think the important thing there is like look at the fidelity and like how much resolution the motor has over the torque spec, because if it has over 15, you're fine. You're not going to use that anyway. Because again, like they get into this race of like, oh, I got the highest one. But it doesn't really.
I need to have somebody from Sim Magic come on and explain this shit, dude. Because it makes no sense to me. Like I know cameras and stuff somewhat, but like it's fucking Sims are just. It's a lot of it is because I'm not good at it. I just don't care.
It takes a while to get used to.
Yeah.
And since I went from the sim to a car, you're getting way more information from the car than you're getting from a sim. The sim, you're only judging your speed by your visual and sound. Well, in the car, you have G-force, right? So most cases, anytime somebody gets into a sim, they crash first turn because they can't tell how fast you're going. Nobody's actually looking at the speedo to know if they're doing 80 or 100 or 120. You can't feel it. I've heard with VR that kind of helps. I run triple screens. I've never tried VR, but I've heard that
makes me want to puke.
That's why I stayed away from it. But
you got a weak stomach, don't do it.
I heard you can get used to it. I never tried.
Yeah,
but I think the key thing to get out of a sim is like all your inputs are the same. So anything you're doing with your feet and your hands, sometimes visually, like where you're looking on track, is a big deal. Because I've even caught myself where like I'm driving and I'm looking almost directly in front of where I am instead of like the next turn, basically.
Yeah.
Especially on drifting, like because you're going slower than road racing, for example. And road racing, you're doing that, you're probably going to crash real fast because you have to look way ahead.
I don't know. And nowadays, if you ever go to a grid life, I'm just saying, the drift cars are fucking turning laps around these road race guys. Some of them.
Probably,
obviously, there's some fucking tanks out there that y'all are cooking down the track. But like
GT3 cars.
Because they'll do the whole where drift cars and road race cars go out at the same time. And it's fucking funny. Just watching when drift cars just drive around the road race guys. I don't know.
I think that's awesome.
I don't know. They may not be fully in it too. I don't know. I'm just saying.
I mean, if it's a spec Miata, like they're going to be slower than most drift cars, right?
Right.
The Honda classes or like most of those cars make maybe 100 to 200 horsepower.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're class, whatever. They all have the same thing. So it doesn't
Dude, whatever
matter,
those little like go-kart looking things, the little mini Miata looking cars that they have now.
The radials? I don't know what they're
Dude,
called.
I don't remember. So I talked to one of the dudes that builds them and stuff while I was there, and it seems fucking cool. Dude, he told me you could run a whole season off of like $5,000 or some shit after buying the vehicle that costs like 20. I was like,
are we in the wrong
That's
sport?
a lie. That's that's a lie. There's no series of racing where it costs $5,000 to run a season. That's nuts.
Maybe Legends cars, I guess.
Dude,
I don't know.
I don't know. If you've done it, let me know, because it seems very interesting and I would love to try it, but that doesn't seem realistic to me.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tiny, bro. Like I'm not joking. Like
Let's say run.
I wouldn't even be
DOT tire.
surprised if it was as long as this couch, so they can
Probably
see
like
it
a
at least.
go-kart
But
almost, but like even go-karts go through tires, depending on the size, obviously, but they go through tires relatively quickly
Yeah.
too. I mentioned the Legend
So
car because
cool.
I think they run. I think it's a street tire. I'm not 100% sure on that.
yeah,
And they don't.
actually, Nate did a video on it. Nate Hamilton. He went out to someone that has those cars, those little cars. I don't know if you watch his YouTube channel at all.
I saw his Montreal recap basically.
Oh, okay. So this was like, I think a couple months ago or some shit. But he went out and got to drive a couple of those and like test it out. And he was like pleasantly surprised by it too.
And they weigh nothing too.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no way they weigh more than 1,500 pounds.
Yeah. That helps consumables
Crazy.
quite a lot. But back to the sim thing, like when you're practicing on a sim, again, like having the mindset that you want to do that in real life and not just chucking it for the sake of chucking it, you know?
Yeah.
Like you have to have like decent practice and have that mentality or else you're just wasting your time, I think. You could obviously have fun all day long and do it with your friends and whatever.
Right.
One night, I happened to hop in this lobby and Rome Charpentier and Jeff Jones were in there and we're on like ice drifting on some snow track for hours and we're just running trains for hours. It's just hilarious.
Yeah.
When would you actually do that? Probably never. But I don't know if you can go ice drifting, but like, it was just fun, right? And especially like to get to know new tracks, it's really easy.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a big community around like modding and creating new stuff for the game that for Seto specifically.
That's one thing I wish I had a sim for, was just for tracks that I've never been to.
For sure, yeah.
Just to test them out a little bit, even if I don't like get a single lap down.
Like at least knowing where you're going helps. A lot of them aren't like 100% to scale, but there's a good example like the Gambler track at Englishtown, the figure 8.
Yeah.
In the game, like the level when you go from like the drag strip to the new area that they paved, it actually does like a little bit of a dip in the game, and that's exactly what it does in real life. So if you like stayed pinned through that, you might spin because again you're going off from different surfaces. But got to be careful when it's say like different surfaces because it's the elevation change, which is small but still changes.
Yeah,
because that's one of the things that you don't get in the sim at all is surface changes.
Yeah,
so if
that's
you're
why outer 2 there is, but it'll eat your car quick.
Yeah, you can wash off into the wall that nobody thinks about too.
Yeah.
Something like the go-kart track at Englishtown, for an example, it's the parking lot basically. So there is different surfaces on that, which especially in the wet makes a huge difference, which you don't get that in the sim. You either drive wet or dry. You don't get like patchy surfaces. You don't get, again, the temperature can vary a little bit, but it's not very drastic to where when I was at East Coast Bash, we did a session at like noon, one at 5, and then one at 8 p.m. So the 8 p.m. session, it already started getting dark out, and I had set my tire pressure a little bit lower than what I did the previous session because I still felt a little bit loose. I could barely spin the tires at that point because the track got cold, which again, something that you don't learn from the sim at all, right? Like even if you do change the time of the track that you're driving, you're going to be on there for a while. So any adjustments you make is always on the same surface per se, right? So that's something that caught me out that I never even considered, again, going from the sim to an actual car. There are really good things about it, though, like the fact that you can have fun with your friends and like practice with potentially the people that you will drive with in real life. So it almost like, I guess, solidifies a community a little bit more because you don't just see each other, talk to each other on track, like you're off track still working with each other.
Yeah, I could see that.
So one of my buddies, Steve, he was actually going to compete in the Gambler. So like that 2 weeks before that, we're on a sim practicing that specific track and like running laps so you can like get the work in for that too. I don't know how you pronounce his name correctly. Hiro Mino, I think. The young kid from Japan that's coming over now.
I just say his last name because it's easier to say.
Yeah, that one.
Shout out Manoa. Injuku driver.
There you go.
There you go, baby. Dude, he's been killing it too.
He's great, and like
Their
a lot
whole
of it's
family
sim.
is wild.
I don't know if he follows Instagram too, but like it's him and his mom at home on the sim all day, which
Dog in the sim, dude. They are animals.
Like my mom doesn't do anything that cool. Like I wish. So
Yeah, shout out to Njuku for helping him out this year. That's a big fucking move.
it's like
Awesome.
that's the future right there, and I give him 5 years. Who's stopping that kid? Like,
Oh yeah.
that's the other side of it too. It's like young kids can now come into it and get on a sim and learn how to drift before they're driving a real car, which kind of makes me feel like shit because I wish I would have started 20 years ago as well,
I
right?
wish I had a sim just to learn how to drive manual.
Yeah, that
like,
does work.
What in the...
Actually,
how long were you driving the sim before you ever even stepped foot in a car?
probably 2 years, I think. Yeah, I think it was at least 2 years. I believe it was in 2021 or maybe 22 even. I believe it's 21, where I went to the school for the first time at Evergreen and drifted a 350Z. Actually, when I showed up, I never told them I simmed or anything. Like, I didn't want to go into it with the impression that I knew something, because in case I didn't, or the training that I actually had didn't
you
actually
wouldn't
translate.
get all the info.
So he's like walking me through, like, when you pull the handbrake, you have to press the clutch at the same time. I'm like, I didn't know that, but like walk me
When
through
I
everything.
started, I
know?
didn't. I've said that a million times. My first event, I had no fucking clue.
Well, again, I didn't want to assume that I knew it either. So, like, I just had him walk me through everything like I knew absolutely nothing about it. And just from
Y'all take that shit for granted now. Oh my God. I wish I had that info.
the baby steps of it were literally just start doing donuts and then figure eights and then, like, try to link 2 turns.
Mhm.
And then, like, do the whole layout, then the layout in reverse. Like, different styles of initiation, whether it's just like mash the throttle and let it oversteer, or actually using the handbrake and to eventually, like, doing feint entries too.
Mhm.
Which I kind of always make the joke where it's like normally step 1 is just doing donuts, and that's where takeovers guys stop.
They
Like, 'cause step 2 is doing figure eights, and that goes.
don't even
over
do
their
donuts right, bro. What are you talking about?
head. So, yeah, I had to throw that in there because whatever, it's like, it's
Screw
kinda funny.
takeovers. I don't care.
So, like, that's all stuff that even if you're learning in a sim, that's the thing that you should start with, because, like, what I wanted to do is download the FD cars and try to go drift Irwindale, which
Right.
I just ate the wall every single time. Like, and there's no way I'm drifting those
Yeah.
cars, you know?
So how similar, like, if you could explain the feeling of the car in the sim compared to your actual drift car now, was it even relatively similar as far as angle and, like, the way the car drove, the twitchiness
So-
of the wheel, blah, blah, whatever it is?
When I first started, no, compared to my car now, because at the time, the big pack that everybody was running was called Tando Buddies, and they're very, like, arcadey. Like, you throw the
Okay.
car sideways, it'll sit there for days, and
Gotcha.
basically it's just a huge lack of grip. In the past few years, there's a car pack. It's called Gravy Garage Cars.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that.
They, on their sheet, they make like 450 horsepower, but they actually have a tire model that makes it to where if you put the car in third gear, it's not spinning the tires. So that actually translates quite well to an actual drift car, right? And they even have 3 tire models on there where it's like semi-slick, streets, scrubs. So if you put it on the semi-slicks, it's not spinning third. If you go to the scrubs, you're on limiter on third, for an example. So that you could actually adjust the car to feel like your actual car. And my case with the Vet, like, I drift most everything in second gear, basically.
Mhm.
And most Japanese cars are around third gear, or maybe they change the diff ratio to be able, like in the Zs, to run third gear, at least at Englishtown. So I would actually lengthen the gearboxes in those to actually make it feel like my car, for an example. So there is a lot of tunability and adjustability that you can have on these cars, and, like, learning. One of the things I haven't tried on my actual car was just adjusting roll bars, which on the game is easy. You just click a button, right?
Right.
And that actually changes how the car pivots around, like when you're transitioning. So if I ever want to make it rotate faster or slower, I can actually know that, okay, this will translate to that and onto the real car as well, which is pretty damn cool. And then when you go up to, like, basically the highest horsepower stuff is like the VDC cars, the Virtual Drift Championship.
Mhm.
So those are like 1,100 horsepower, somewhere around there. And they have, like, a pretty good tire model where they're very fast. So, like, yeah, you're drifting third, fourth gears kind of thing, but it would teach you very quickly. If you're not smooth with the throttle and you're very abrupt, it will just shoot you everywhere. Like, it's very hard to control.
Gotcha.
So if you're not smooth with them, they're very unforgiving. A lot of people hate them for that very reason, but it kind of ends up being the same thing with the lower horsepower cars. Just the speed that you're going is lower. So going back to the VDC cars, like you are moving very quickly. Like I like to do the FD style or like the FD Japan style tracks and all that thing. So it becomes very difficult with even smoke, because you can actually have like a realistic model of smoke on the car where you're going blind through transitions. And if you're not in the right spot on certain tracks, like you see that in Orlando, right? What's happening? If you're back like a few feet to where you're supposed to be, you're in that cloud. You don't see.
Utah is really bad.
Same, yeah. You don't have no idea where you're going. So like it will teach you that very quickly, like where to position your car. And even like diving through transition, all that stuff, you could do that worry free too. So you could experiment with different things. One of the more recent things that the servers have come out with was actually an AI model of somebody doing laps. So like they'll record a guy just doing a lap on a track. So if you want to practice chasing, like you can hop in one of these servers that has a robot literally just doing laps, and you could just chase him every single time. So like, it's nice to like.
It doesn't seem like very crazy, because I feel like that's still, even without AI, they could do that.
You were reliant.
I guess it would still be AI. Just whatever. I don't know.
You were basically reliant every time on driving with other people. Now you can hop in a server by yourself and just murder that same lap over and over again, which is nice to get like the perfect line down if they have the perfect lead going. Where what it doesn't teach you is like how to adapt to when it's not perfect, right? So it's nice to get like the base down, and once you have that, it's like when a transition, because that's a big thing that I learned off of Sim 2 is like when you're doing a transition at the same time as a lead car, for the most part, you're going to be behind because they're further ahead on the track. Like the line that you're taking is not going to be exactly the same, because if you think about it, if both are transitioning exactly at the same time, you're at different points of the track because you're behind him. So your line's going to be off. So anticipating their transitions and doing it sooner always set you up to where now you have a little bit more momentum to where if you need to slow down, you can, versus trying to catch up again. Because then anytime you're playing the whole catch up game, typically doesn't go well.
Yeah. Yep.
LZMF field.
Damn.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where like
go check out the podcast before this one with Jacob Giddens. We talked about that, and we got a lot of info from that. So go check it out.
Well, like not judging who's at fault in that or at all. Like I'm not trying to say one was right or one was wrong, but it's like if Matt Field wasn't trying to play catch up in that thing, maybe that situation wouldn't have happened altogether, right?
Yeah.
And as a chase driver, that's probably the last position you want to be, especially in a comp, like trying to catch the guy because you made a mistake and he's running away from you, right? Because typically that would lead to more mistakes, which whoever was at fault for that, you know, that's still a mistake, right? And even like the first few times that I started doing tandem, it was again on the go-kart track at Englishtown, and a lot of the inputs that I was doing to the car, like I didn't have to panic. Like there was a situation where like he transitioned a little bit, I think slower than what I expected, and didn't go on throttle as soon as I expected either.
Yeah.
So like I just had to slow down a little bit more, which like a dab of foot brake, and it was fine. Like actually Reese was in the car, and he's like after I was like, I got a little closer. I'm like, did I? Like I didn't. I was just like, okay, like
I was just driving. I was in the moment, dog. What?
Because like your subconscious is taking over. Really, like you're not thinking about what you're doing. You see and you react, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was a really nice thing of coming from the sim, because that was like automatic. I didn't have to think about any of those inputs. So, like, if this is a good judge, I guess, of progression, a lot of people talk about like when you go to Club Loose, like to get out of from C to B to A group is difficult. I think there is a little bit of negativity around that because it's hard to do, and people sometimes think they might be higher skill level than what they actually are. And Club Loose has been around for so long that it's like, you know, Turk and all that stuff came out of that place, right? So if Turk's an A-level driver, what are we, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're judging off of that, like you're probably not as hot shit as you think you
I honestly wish a lot of events adapted that concept more and kept true to it.
Around me, they do, as far as I heard, have always like groups like for levels of driver. But the first ever event I did at Evergreen, first session they bumped me up to B group, and just because I wasn't spinning.
Yeah.
So the standard basically is what I'm saying is lower. When you're driving at Englishtown, I think it sometimes discourages people because they're not like moving up. And I think it was I did 3 or 4 events in one clinic, and I went from C to B group, which, as far as I've heard, that's relatively quick. Like I've heard of people being there for years and not going from C to B group.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has to do with also like taking direction and listening to what they're telling you, because as far as I could tell, nobody's there to try to hinder you. They're only trying to get you to improve.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to be driving with these guys that are actually on grid, like the grid workers.
Exactly.
Most of them drive themselves too, right? So like they don't want to be driving with somebody that's going to wreck their car either, right?
No. We're there to get seat time. Well, so this is at Grassroots events.
Yeah.
So like
open days.
We're there to get seat time. The objective isn't to necessarily put on a show. Like it's always going to be a show, but like you go to Grid Life or something like that, groups will never work. You don't. You have like 30 minutes of track time no matter what, and it's in sections throughout the day. So like you just send everybody. But there's also application process with those. So like you have to be a good driver anyways to even make it, or somewhat decent driver.
I've heard of that for New Jersey Motorsports Park. They're like a bigger like racing facility, and they hosted I think it's kind of like Grid Life. It was like an elite tuner event or whatever it was called.
Right.
And they had other, like road racing and car shows and 2-step competitions and all that stuff going on, whatever those are. And they required as like A group drivers only, and then B like stay tuned. So I'm assuming if they didn't fill in the slot with A drivers, then they would get B drivers too. While these other drift events that I'm talking about, like beginners, like last event that I was there, a colleague that I know, like first ever time drifting, he showed up, C group, he's learning how to drift for the first time.
Yeah.
But I think everybody has a goal of eventually getting an A group to be able to tandem, because that's the only group that you can tandem with, right? But there's obviously safety requirements that come with it too. Like you don't need a cage if you're not going to tandem, but if you are, then you do need a roll cage for the road course. And, it can be sometimes discouraging, like if you're on the cusp, like you might have done some tandems already and you want to go up to A group and drive with these other guys. But, they're watching you. They know what you're doing. They see everything you do.
And that's not everywhere, too. Sometimes event hosts will judge you based off of your driving throughout the day and then let you tandem, all of that stuff, if you don't have a cage. That's what that part is what I meant.
It's all speed related. So, like, they'll let you do it on the car track without a cage, but they won't let you tandem on the road course without a cage, but you can drive it without a cage. The gambler layout, you can't drive it without a cage because lined by walls. Like if you mess up, you're going into a wall. Ask me how I know.
Been there.
Yeah, I met one of them.
Beach bin, baby. Oh yeah.
But I'm not familiar with the tracks further north from me. The only 2 that I've been to so far were the Evergreen and Englishtown so far, and there's so many events at Englishtown, and you could all do private days too with the East Coast Drift School. Like Chris Knapp is the one who runs that, and he's awesome. Like you pay for track time, and you typically would get more seat time at a private event than on the public days. It's just the public ones are where you're going to meet people who you're going to eventually tandem with. It's like the private days, you're limited to maybe 4 cars. If you don't already have a group of friends to tandem with, like where are you going to find them? It's not like you put a Facebook ad like need partners to tandem. So through the sim actually community, you can eventually meet people that are local to you as well. That's kind of a long shot because you're playing with everybody in America or Europe or so on, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it's like an Xbox type thing where you jump in lobbies and stuff.
Oh, actually, like Scotty D, he has his own Discord, which for the most part was like SoCal guys that all like drove together, I think in real life, and then started their own Discord. So like when I jump in with them, I'm on the East Coast, and he's not even SoCal anymore either. But you could potentially find new people and all that stuff that way too. But the public days is where, at least to me so far, is where you're gonna make new
nothing will be just being in person with everyone and meeting people. That's always gonna be way better.
It's usually the guy that you park next to, you end up becoming friends with. At least
almost every time, bro. It's like it's awesome.
It's been pretty nice like that, and luckily, like the one guy, Aaron, he drives a blue 350Z and just kills it every single time.
Hell yeah.
And like anytime I had a question, like I could bounce it off him. And so like he's been there for a few years already. So he already been through the experiences that I'm going through now. So that could save you potentially a lot of time and money too, trying to like learn new stuff when somebody again can just tell you, hey, do it this way.
Yeah.
And hopefully eventually I'll be tandeming with him as well, right? So, you know, that's the next big step after I get like my initiation down, like it being consistent and all that stuff. Cause that's, as far as I've understood, that's the next big step is like being consistent, being able to adapt, and then learning how to get the hell out of the way to be able to tandem. Because like if you make a mistake, don't just stop there in the middle of the track because where are the rest of the guys going?
Yeah.
And in Englishtown, they'll run like 6-7 car trains sometimes too, which is wild to watch. Doesn't always go well, but for the most part, they make it to the end.
Yeah. You've got to be. You're going to be so far ahead. Most people that started with you, like, because you just said you were surprised by how quickly you moved up in groups, but like, you're doing probably 5 times more to learn how to drift than the average person trying to learn. Like, you're going to beginner days. So how many have you been to by now?
So
is it total?
Full classes with the rental car was 2. I had a class where Reese came out to the track on my car and gave me instruction there. I did a clinic and I think 3 or maybe 4 Club Loose events and maybe like 2 private days. All together. Yeah, so
that's
like
crazy.
The classes were a year apart from each other. So like I think 2021 I did one, and 22 I did another, and then 23 I bought the car.
Still, that's nuts. Like you're already doing 10 times more. Because like most people getting into drifting, usually lower budget, which there's nothing wrong with that. So they're like maybe an event a month they get to attend or something like that, and that's just going to an event. Like, and maybe they have a sim at home, maybe they don't. Most of the time when I started, hardly anyone had a sim at home. It was very uncommon. So, so like, I don't know.
I've been pretty much doing about an event a month, give or take a few weeks. But since maybe October, November, somewhere around there, it's been every month since. Like, and when they don't have
so
events,
far ahead. I feel like, dude, a lot of people getting into it, even though if they have the opportunity and the ability to go to a clinic or a beginner day or get lessons from someone, they won't do it out of like embarrassment. They feel like it's cheesy or like whatever to go get help to learn. Like it's not. Like that's crazy.
Absolutely.
I would have given anything to have these resources. I didn't know none of this stuff.
Like you might even justify flying to a school to take lessons.
Go fly to Reese or go fly to Texas Drift Academy. That's what I would say.
Because the amount of experience that you're going to get in such a small amount of time is going to be huge. And how much time would that take you and entry fees and all that stuff to do on your own? And at Club Loose, they actually run 3 different clinics, like in the beginner clinic, an intermediate, and advanced clinic. So I actually attended the intermediate clinic before I was even B group. And to give you a perspective of C time, they ran a Club Loose event on Saturday, which I think C group had 2 hour-and-a-half sessions, right? And I don't think I burned through a set of tires. I think like a set of Kendas, I believe, lasted me the whole day. Yeah. And on Sunday during the clinic, I burned 6 more tires. That's just the contrast of how much more you're driving during a clinic. And it's not just driving. It's like you have people, it's such a smaller field of drivers that maybe there's 30 of us, something like that. And there's 10 track workers. So imagine like each track worker has 3 guys that he has to like help basically. Yeah. They literally had a radar gun out there, like measuring your entry speed. And after the first 2 laps, they pulled everybody out of the car and specifically pointed at me like, go faster. Because
that's crazy.
But it was like the progression on that 3 laps alone was like the first lap I was in the mid 40s mile an hour entry, second lap in the 50s. And then it was like 60, 61, 62, 61, somewhere around there, which was like the appropriate speed. But it literally took them telling me like, you need to go faster because I was, again, just powering up the hill and making it, right? I could have still been doing the same thing over and over again to this day if nobody told me, right? And actually, during this past event at East Coast Bash, like I was mentioning, the difficulties that I'll have with the initiation, I asked one of the grid workers, like, hey, this is happening. What can I do? He told me, like, that specific case, like, aim the car more towards the tire wall to, like, initiate a little bit wider.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning before I went to the track, I actually hopped on the sim and practiced exactly what he was telling me. And when I got to the track, I'm like, oh, shit, this is what he was talking about.
Y'all got no excuses no more. I'm sick of this shit. Y'all got every damn tool in the book now to fucking learn how to drift.
So even
wish.
from a cost standpoint, like I didn't cheap out on the sim altogether with computer monitors, stand, chair, all that stuff. I probably spent like $7,000 or $8,000 on the sim, which you could buy a Z potentially for that money. But the amount of time that you can get, and like not maintenance costs and all that stuff, like if you're gonna drift 500 hours, how many tires would that equate to, right?
So if you were to suggest a budget like sim for someone to go buy, what would it like? What would you suggest?
You could probably spend half of that nowadays because with so much more equipment on the market, like while my wheelbase costs $1,500, you can get a great one for $6,000 or $8,000 maybe.
As little as I know Moza, you can get like a whole setup without the like stand and shit, of course. But like I think it was $900 total.
So
with the 3 pedals, direct drive or whatever it's called, wheel, shifter, handbrake.
What I was saying, the wheelbase itself is literally just the motor. Doesn't even have the hub to put the steering wheel on yet. And like I said, a SemiCube one, I got the second tier, whatever it's called. That base alone is like $1,500. So when you go down to, when I say go down, it's not like you're getting that much less of quality either. Like you can go to SimMagic or Moza or whatever other brand and potentially get the base with the steering wheel already attached to it for what you're saying, $800-900, and have a great wheel already. Pedals can range on the low end maybe for like $300, and you could be perfectly well in like a Fanatec. I think their base pedals like around $350. The complete opposite end of the spectrum of that is SemiCube came out with force feedback pedals, so like the pedal actually push your foot
shit
back.
Like that.
It's like $1,500 per pedal though, or 18. It's absolutely insane.
No,
but like keep in mind, where does this stuff come from? Like any Formula One team, any GT3 team, they all have these amazing sim
they got the
rigs.
money to dump into it to research it and make it accurate.
How much does it cost to rent a Formula One track?
I don't want to know.
So like if they're spending $1 million on a simulator, that's still very cheap for them.
Nothing to them.
Like they even have...
That's ass wiping money to them.
Yeah, literally. They'll even have... I don't know if it's a hydraulic, just some kind of tensioner that attaches to your helmet to pull on your neck during turns to train your neck during sims. Like
that one I had to let rip. Screw that.
There's G-force suits that literally will squish you to emulate G-forces through turns on simulators too. Like you can go all out with this stuff, and depending on what level you go to. So
My God, man.
If you saw that giveaway that Adam was doing with that P1X
Podium 1,
it's like a $60 sim rig, right? So from where I'm at to go to the next level would basically add motion to it. Or you could maybe argue VR versus triples, but whatever. So a good hydraulic setup is like $30,000. So when you want the 6-axis, when you want the, it'll push your rig forward under braking, and your harnesses are actually static. So you'll be pulled into harnesses to simulate braking forces as well. Like when you get to that level, it's like the point of diminishing return where you have to spend a lot to get a little bit more, which would that translate a lot better to the actual real life? Probably. But for $30,000, you could do a lot of driving, right?
Yeah. That's been the only thing that holds me back from even getting a sim, because I already did all of the work without it for the most part. Not all of it, of course, but I did majority of the work. And now I know how to drive. The only necessary thing I would need a sim for is to get better at Tandem and then learn new tracks before I go. Other than that, I wouldn't even think to use the sim. So I can't justify spending $1,000 or $2,000 because I'm going to be the guy that has to go all out with the way the stand is and make it look similar to a car or whatever. But
so
I don't know.
On the rig itself, you can get creative. Like if you have metal at home, if you know how to weld. I did one out of profile. Like I purchased from one brand that they were supposedly like really good. Turns out the profile that they used was very like thin material. So like my whole rig would shake, and I would actually like, take away from like the force feedback that you would feel. And I ended up like sourcing profiles from like a local just extruder around wherever I lived, and that stiffened up my rigs a lot more to where, again, you get more feedback through the steering wheel because nothing else is shaking. And that could cost quite a bit of money too. Like you could spend anywhere from $600 to $1,000 just on the rig. Some guys, like I said, do like if they have some kind of material at home they can make the rig out of, they can get away with that as well. But if you're not looking to compete and you don't mind spending a few more laps to learn the track, like I think it'd be hard to justify. Like if you're just trying to go out and have fun with your friends.
Yeah.
Like if you go to a new track, okay, you do a sight lap, you take a few laps to get used to it. If you already know the basics, I don't know if it would, like you said, justify spending the money when you could buy tires, for example, right?
Yeah.
So
Really.
I think it's a huge tool if you're learning like from zero, or if you're like trying to get that last 10% out of like a technique or a track or something like that, where you could hammer it over and over and over again without the cost factor being even a deal, right? Yeah. Like a lot of the pros guys are going for it too. But again,
I mean, yeah, but like I understand Sim Magic is working with like FDE and stuff this year, so I'm sure they either got those all at heavy discounts or provided or whatever the circumstance was with that. But I enjoy seeing that because that means FD's growing, drifting's growing, all of that.
Well, when you have the case, money aside, when you have the case of like what we were talking about before with Manoa coming at such a young age and being that good, like all the older guys are going to get to the point where it's like, how do we compete with this, right?
Yeah, it's going to step the whole level of the game up.
Absolutely. Like you can't take away experience, obviously. Like Vaughn has probably been in every single scenario possible and imaginable on track in real life with a car screaming in your face versus on a sim, right?
That's why he passes people in practice for no reason, just because he can.
Just because he can.
Like, what a G, bro.
While like you might see Manoa, I'm not saying he did or didn't. I'm just saying you might potentially see him make mistakes that are just a lack of experience of like real life experience thing. Yeah. But he's 95% of the way there, or maybe even more, because he's
cooking,
winning,
bro.
Dude, right?
Just let him cook.
Look at like Mad Mike's kids, like the guy, like Link, I think his name is, right?
Link, I'm not sure.
He's racing all sorts of stuff, like trophy truck style things at again teenager age, right?
I mean, even Leah Block, Ken Block's daughter.
Was she off
She's been doing this shit for fucking years, bro. Since he was a kid. Before she even turned 16, I think they built her a Fox body to drift.
Well, what you see is almost with like major league sports where basketball, soccer, baseball, like kids could start at 4 or 5 years old, right? Yeah. The only time you actually saw that was like maybe go-karting, and that's like Lewis Hamilton sort of level of guys, right? Yeah. And it takes, parents with money in order to do that. So with the sim side of stuff, even if it's like a really budget sim, like you could be very young and learn at a very young age how to drive a car sideways, right? Which, well, I don't know, 5 years ago, was that really a possibility or even a thought, right? So I would think that over the next 10 years, the level of, I mean, you already see it in FD. It's like half of the guys there could potentially win the event almost, where if you see like new rookies coming in at young ages and being on that level already, you kind of see that in Europe, like Knick Knack is a big example of that. Connor's a huge example of that, right? Yeah. Like it's gonna be very hard. It already is, but I think it's only gonna get harder and harder to compete. Like I think there was a point where like if you had the money, you could hang, but with all this adding to the conversation of like the time that you're actually putting in behind the wheel, as that becomes more and more like translatable with good simulators. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you have the money, I think. Like if you're not good because you're not putting in the reps, like you're probably gonna be left in the dust.
Where do you see the future of sim racing going with all of this? With how fast it's improved already?
kind of hard for me to tell because esports kind of flopped, if that makes any sense. Where you would think, again, during COVID and all that, there was a huge boom in esports. But then there was a lot of controversy around like people cheating, people modifying files, people having other drivers drive for them and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So like it kind of took a lot away from the sim market. And especially on the competitive drift level, they're not using any title that makes it equal across the board. So like people are exploiting coding or like modifying tires and all that stuff to get the best that they can, where you don't even have to be like in-car camera to compete in these virtual drift championships, where to me that completely defeats the purpose of a sim. Like if it's to simulate real life, why are you driving with your view above the car, right? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And so until there's like a big title that like iRacing that would apply just to sim. So I don't know if you're familiar with iRacing. Basically, the content, you have to buy all of it, which can become pricey. Tracks, you have to purchase cars, so you have to pay a monthly subscription, but it's the same thing for every single person. So they can run like a more legit racing series almost online because there's no way for you to mess with anything that's happening in there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Versus people are caught like hacking Formula One, like when Formula One was doing their esports online, people like change the tire models to get more grip, right? That's a thing, and like that's the same thing with the Seto, right? So unless maybe Torque Drift would be the one that would do that, I'm not really sure, because the other side of that is like, what is the market for actual sims? Because like with a Seto already being what it is, like you can get great practice out of it. You're just missing that equality when it comes to competition on a level playing field. So maybe that's not a popular opinion, that because like I've tried to do a couple of online competitions, and I wouldn't say I was even good enough to hang with the guys, but at the same time, where it's like if I'm playing on triple screens and with a pretty strong force feedback wheel that I make it feel like it's real life, I actually have to put some muscle into driving the car. Not much, but some, right? Yeah. While somebody else is like on a Logitech wheel that they're doing this and they're keeping up. Or like I've seen guys using a mouse and still driving and doing tandems and stuff like that.
That shit's crazy.
I don't know how they do it, but they do it.
No.
You know?
Y'all are wild.
So I don't know if that's controversial around that thing or not, because...
See, well, like I could see that. Like the virtual just drift championship stuff. Like I've even tried just watching it. I obviously can't watch it. It's very...
doesn't look real at all.
Yeah, it's odd. But like their driving is nuts. Like it's almost identical, perfect laps every single time. So like it makes it honestly boring. But one thing I'm gonna throw like a curveball at y'all. This is gonna be kind of odd, but I had this idea like pop in my head of with how crazy like autonomous cars and stuff have become, sims have become insane, and then like YouTubers left and right are making remote controlled four-wheelers, cars, forklifts, like all of these different stuff. I would love, even if it was just for like someone with a lot of money did it for a YouTube video where you did a remote controlled drift car that was controlled by a sim. So you're driving a sim, but you're it's operating an actual car on track. We can't be that far off. There's no way.
I've seen it on the smaller scale with RC cars where they'll put like a camera on the thing and it's operated from your sim at home.
That's cool.
I haven't seen it on like a full scale, like a full size car, because why not just be in the car? I guess at that point. Like
well, yeah, absolutely. Like the RC, that makes 10 times more sense to do it in an RC car.
It's cool though. Like they're driving through a park.
Oh my god!
With their RC car, but they're in their house, and the RC car is literally there. So if you crash, you're kind of shit out of luck. Then, like somebody has to go get it for you.
Oh my god!
But
man, that would be cool.
The only thing I could think of is like you would throw the cars at each other, not care if they crash because you're not. You
still got to reap all of the money that goes back into building the car. Probably 10 times more because there's a bunch of electronics added to it.
Potentially, yeah.
That's probably a very bad idea. I just it came to my head and I thought it was kind of cool.
I mean, that kind of almost makes me revert to ice drifting, where it's like slow speeds where people can be bumping into each other. It doesn't really do much.
Yeah.
Or like what the Irish doing in like field drifting, which is kind of the same like level of grip.
Right.
I don't know if that would almost be the end result, because they're throwing the cars at each other all day and they don't care because they're going 20, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to see like some crazy 100-mile-an-hour entries where nobody cares about their well-being,
Dude,
that would probably be cool.
Yeah. Hell yeah. All right. Well, I guess where we'll jump off sims and stuff. We've done enough talk on that. So what is like your goal moving forward? Like, are there any tracks that you want to go see or drive at? Like, FD is the end goal. Like, what's your plan with drifting now that you've gotten into it?
So FD was kind of like the thing to do, right? When when I saw FD, I'm like, holy crap, like that's awesome. Like that's what I would love to do. Obviously funding for that is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And like logistics, all that stuff is insane. So if that dream would ever be even remotely a possibility, I'd like try to map out like what would the steps be to get there. And obviously getting as much experience as I can, started tandeming and like driving with other people and like do that. And then grassroots competition. So that's would actually be my next step. Like in Englishtown, they do a they call it the Casino Royale. It's like on their car track. It's like very intro friendly competition for new people. A lot of like stock Z's, stock BMWs, and that sort of thing. So I might have maybe too much car for that sort of competition. Maybe from what I saw, again, a lot of people.
Indie Street League.
They're a bit further for me. So the other than that one would be the 235 Gambler class, which that's not really like intro friendly because you have really good drivers driving in that class.
Yeah,
so,
FD drivers in there.
For sure, yeah. Like winning a battle there would probably be a huge deal, but like the incremental steps would probably be first at Casino Royale and then potentially doing a Gambler from there. And maybe a couple of years of the 235 class and then potentially moving up from there because at that point you need more power and all that stuff for a bigger tire and all that. From what I've heard from FD drivers, it's like if you're not winning your local series, what are you trying to do? Move up for, right? So it's kind of hard to have that vision of like, all right, I want to do ProAm when I haven't even done my first one.
Right.
So it almost to the point of being like,
it's a good mindset to have, I would say.
Like I keep teetering with like, is it just being arrogant that I want to compete with guys that have been doing it way longer than I have when I've never done it, right? Yeah. But without the goal in mind and like believing that you can do it, like you will never take the first step, I think.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at this point, where as soon as I iron out like reliability and all that stuff on the car, like I want to jump into a competition as soon as possible, which may be the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, just practice as much as I can.
Hell yeah. Well, sick. That'll be cool. Because I'm not a competition guy. So like I just don't really care for it. It's never drawn that connection to me. I just like having fun. Like the environment of drift events, like I said earlier, what I purely enjoy. So I hope that goes extremely well for you because
there is a different mindset 100% for it. Because like when you go into just Club Loose event or Republic or Grid Life, whatever it is, everybody's there with the same goal, right? Everybody's there to enjoy themselves. Yeah, when you're going to a competition, everybody's there to win. So you're going to have one guy that's happy and 31 that aren't, right?
Yeah.
So like that's what you're signing yourself up for. If you're not like
sounds toxic, when you put it that way.
Well, that's the reality of it, right? Because like if you're going to competitions literally to compete and to win, if you're not trying to win, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? Like you're not going there for seat time because you have way better off like just looking at entry fees alone. You could do like 2 private days and drive for 4 hours, then pay for 1 entry fee for a comp where you're going to drive a handful of laps, right? So like that's not what you're there for. It's literally to win.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that like aggression and want to do that, then I think you'd be wasting your time. Honestly, like just go have fun. Like
exactly.
That's not what you want. And that might also come from like the reasons why people get into it too. Cause like when a lot of people come from like, I guess BMX and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is like a very style thing and you're there to have fun and like the progression with your friends and all that sort of stuff. Right. Or coming from like the stance part. Right. when I looked into drifting I was kind of like more into drag racing, which is, who's the fastest.
Yeah.
And then once I realized that was like just a huge money war, it's like who spends the most wins kind of thing. Like the next thing was like adding more of a driver to the thing, which again, drifting. Yeah. So having the cool thing, the most badass car, the fastest car, all that stuff was like the appeal to me. And like, if you have the fastest car, somebody has to be slower, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
mix them two together.
So it's not to say I think one's better than the other, but I don't think the grassroots scene would be what it is without the competition, because
absolutely not. It wouldn't.
Who would develop an angle kit, right? Like if there's not money coming in from like for development.
Yeah, FD is one of the best. FD, Drift Masters, all these big events and like competitions. Absolute necessity for drifting.
The technology ends up becoming cheaper over time, right? So then it becomes affordable for us. Like if an angle kit, you had to do it all from scratch 10 years ago. I don't really know.
The only way to make a sport bigger is to bring bigger companies in. And you need a competition at that scale to do that.
Well, what I mean by that is like traction control and ABS, right? That didn't come from cars. It came from like aviation and then maybe into motorsports and then eventually made it to road cars. Yeah. So like as time went by, those things came down to us. So what we see now of like kind of an extreme example is like the G-Force dog boxes that you like get from NASCAR. What did those cost 20, 30 years ago? And now like people can actually put them in their drift cars.
Yeah.
I would hope they've been coming down in price, right? Same thing with angle kits. Like if you have to custom fab every arm on your car, how much money does that actually cost? Where right now you can go like on Enjuku and just click a few buttons and you have an angle kit at your door, right? Costs money obviously, but that the R&D that went into that I think would only be possible because you have a team with a big budget that wants to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
And potentially they got an ROI by now developing a product that they could sell, right?
Yeah.
Dual caliber brackets, handbrakes, all this sort of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. You could go down the laundry list of that stuff.
It never ends.
Yeah. So, with the competition stuff, like you were saying, so since obviously you'll end up having to upgrade your car. So, let's say you won like $5,000 of a giveaway to Enjuku. What would you go and spend on your car right now to upgrade it?
At $5,000 they sell quick changes?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably a quick change.
Really?
That would, if it was simply like the bolt-on thing.
Would that even cover a quick change?
You'd probably have to put $500, but you'd be close.
Yeah, okay.
Well, like the more difficult part, I think, on the Vet would actually be because of the transmission and the rear thing. Because I know they make one that adapts to the factory transmission or like a rear mount transmission, but I don't think that would be the same as if you ran like a front transmission with the diff in the rear.
Yeah, you definitely want to run front transmission.
So like the probably more realistically, maybe an exhaust setup because I'm still like stock exhaust. Either that or maybe again like a refresh for the motor, so like new cam lifters.
You really are about the reliability and shit.
Well, it sucks when the car doesn't work, when you have to work on it, right?
No argument there. God knows I know that.
The fun part isn't wrenching on the thing, it's actually driving it. And
dude, by the way, Andy May, you remember his episodes? I've done 2 with him so far. Probably. The dude that travels the country with his family in an RV.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh my God. Right? I feel so bad. I used to do his media and stuff too. Obviously, I don't anymore, but he has had the worst luck in drifting ever I have ever seen. It's so bad. And I'll make jokes with him too, because now I'm running through a chain of bad luck myself. And I'm like, oh, I'm falling down your path, Andy. But blew his turbo motor. I don't know what exactly he runs. BMW, M54 or whatever the fuck. But blew that motor. And his wife, without him knowing, bought him another one to be built.
I saw a clip on Instagram.
Super cool.
Best present ever.
Is the best. Oh my God, she's amazing. But did that. He texted me literally today, like 30 minutes before you showed up. Videos of his car, the whole front end is like burnt to a crisp and shit. Yeah, it caught on fire and motor's toast already. Apparently, it was one of something that he did. I didn't get that text in time before you showed up. So I don't know exactly what happened, but go give him some love on Instagram or
That's
something.
rough,
He
yeah.
needs it. He's been going through it.
Well, what I even mentioned earlier too about like a lot of times we'll be in our driveway until 1 or whatever in the morning working on our cars. Like it's very easy to overlook something when you're exhausted in the dark, whatever it is. So, not saying that it's his fault, obviously, but it's like all it takes.
Oh, he said it himself. It was his fault.
All it takes is like a pinched line of whatever, or like a wire or something like
he
that.
looked over, literally, like you said.
You put a pipe on backward, whatever, like that's all it takes, I think, sometimes.
Cross your lines once and everything.
Leave a control arm loose.
Yeah, go give Andy some love. We don't have to go too deep into that. But
I mean, I think you touched on this last episode that I watched about like all the bad luck and even FD.
Oh, yeah.
Odie just lost a second motor back to back.
Yeah.
He lost one in Atlanta, practicing in Orlando, loses a second one with fire.
Luckily, that was with Caleb. If you didn't see that episode, go watch that one too.
Luckily,
he had a truck burned down. His tow rig burned down. And that's what started the conversation. Yeah. Then we were talking about James Dean car that burned down and like the Drift Games guys. Dude, it's been a crap year for drifting, dog.
Well, I don't know if it's just what actually happens, but people are seeing it, honestly, because...
Yeah, we have more access to see it.
I was just listening to a podcast with Losi. I forget the guest he had on that. Is a crew chief, was a crew chief for Adam LZ, and is a crew chief right now for, like, helps out with LTR and all that. He's been building, like, winning level cars across the planet for years, right? And even when he was a crew chief, apparently with LZ, they lost 4 motors in a season.
Yeah.
Right? So one over sight from, like, one of the guys working on the car, or other times it's just stuff breaks, right? And his attitude towards it was very, like, eye-opening, where he literally says stuff breaks. Like, it has a threshold, it will break no matter what. No matter what you do, no matter how, unless you're changing everything every single time, stuff will fatigue, right? If you turn over to the aviation side, like, metal has a shelf life, basically, before it fatigues and it has to be replaced. So when we're running stuff to the limit of what it's actually meant to be doing, no wonder stuff's going to blow up, right?
Yeah, it's just going to happen.
So, like, back to the reliability part, where on an LS, like, when I got the car, like, the lifter would start tapping. Like, after beating it up a bit and changing the oil a few times, now it, like, cleared out.
To the LS.
Like, so that's why I was mentioning, like, refreshing the motor too, is like going to a shorter lift lifter. I'm a mouthful. To be able to, like, potentially turn a little bit more RPM. And the reasoning behind that is simply, if you have a little bit more RPM to play with and you're not sacrificing power band, you have more to play with gearing instead of going to a quick change. Instead of trying to, like, optimizing the gear ratio, you could do it with a motor, kind of. At least that's the hope.
The concept of it, yeah.
Yeah, like, if I want a few more mile-an-hour wheel speed, instead of changing my gear ratio, whatever, and, like, if I could just turn another 500 RPM, just turn. Like, why doing the maintenance and upgrading the motor already, then potentially that would solve that issue, like, with like, all in one shot, hopefully. But the thing about keeping it, like, simple, other than what I've already done, like, not trying to go with, like, crazy intakes, not trying to go with, like, crazy lift cams and all that stuff, or, like, aftermarket ECUs and all that, because, like, you're introducing a lot more variables to it that are by your hand, not by, like, an engineer, right? That's somebody that actually built a car. So when you're talking about, like, if you broke a part repeatedly and then upgrading it, sure. Cooling, upgrading to bigger radiators and fans and all that stuff, absolutely. But just changing stuff for the sake of changing stuff, like, especially if you don't, like, in my case, I don't need to. Like, I'm already getting, like, on those cheaper tires, like, a relatively short tire life out of them. So, like, adding more money to an engine isn't going to help my driving by no means. It's just going to make me drive less, potentially, because, you know, I have more on consumables. Yeah. Which, it's really easy to throw around 800, 1,000 horsepower number, but, like, at 600, you're probably lasting 2 to 4 laps on a set of tires, right? Which,
even at 500 with Scott, I mean, he's doing 3 laps on a set of GTs.
Yeah. I mean, compound matters a lot, because, like, I burned a set of, they had already a lap on them, but I burned a set of Nittos in 4 laps on a kart track. Yeah. But they hooked and they moved and they put up a cloud of smoke, right? That felt amazing. But
I'm sure.
you know, there's a big
Sure,
trade
they
off.
smelled amazing too.
Keep moving forward. You know?
Good tires smell better. I'm not joking. When they're burned off, they smell way better if it's a good tire.
That was actually something that was a lot like eye-opening too, where you could go down the path of like chasing adjustability on the car, like whether it's coilovers or whether it's alignments and all that kind of stuff, and just changing the tire makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
Like,
I will say, make sure your camber and stuff is zeroed out. Like, focus on your alignment first to that extent. Get it zeroed out to where you're not wasting the tire.
what I mean is like trying to add like toe in the rear, or trying to like go your coilers are super soft to try to get more grip out of
if
it.
you're learning how to drift, you're not even focused on that anyway. Shouldn't be.
Just again, I was like doing clicks here and there, like pondering, do I add some toe to this thing? Do I try to make it faster or not try to make it faster? And just slapping new tires on it just made such a huge difference. I'm like,
Yeah.
I could just buy these and not think about anything else anymore.
Yeah.
Granted, they cost more money, obviously, but like from a Nitto to a Kenda, it's not that comparable.
Yeah. Okay.
That
Well,
is a solution, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess since we've talked about a lot of advice, but I guess if you had to top it, what would be your best piece of advice for anyone just getting into drifting?
I would say start with the sim and then instruction. Even if you're a year or two in, like get a good instructor, somebody very reputable that has a good eye for it and all that stuff. Like, again, Reese is spectacular with that, right? I mean, he's judging at the highest level. He watches the best drifting in the world, right? So, like, he would be a great candidate. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there that's just local
from
to me,
Denofa
right?
School.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, Denofa himself, right?
Yeah.
Would be another option. And that, I think, will help you improve and cut down so much on your learning curve that, to me, it's a no-brainer. Like, if you're spending money to be there, spending a little bit more to learn it
You don't
quickly.
realize how much money you'll waste without that information.
And even more so, again, from the sim. Like, you can cut out, if it's 100 hours of seat time by using a sim, what is that in tires? Think about it, you know?
I don't want to know that math.
And 100 hours on a sim isn't much at all, like, especially when you hear figures of thousands, right?
Right.
But just getting that basic coordination between your feet and your hands, like, that was actually a training scar, if you wanted to call it that, from driving like higher horsepower cars in the sim. You want to be like the Japanese guy that like constantly fettling the throttle and like stabbing at it and sounds really cool and whatnot. And you apply that to a regular car, and your car is just hopping around in the back because you're constantly on and off throttle, which is something that I was doing a lot too. And it makes it unpredictable too, because now you're like loading and unloading the suspension a lot. So like your contact patch is effectively changing. Yeah. Supposedly. So that actually makes it harder to drive the car because you want to sound cool or look cool versus just like rolling on and off the throttle. Again, power allowing you to do so makes such a big difference. Actually, this new kid that was just at the track the other day came out with a V8 E30 as his first ever drift car. And you saw...
Wow, man.
It was impressive, though. Like, again, first time ever drifting, like did maybe something donut in a parking lot. And that was the biggest thing that I watched him do, is like the back of his car was just jumping up and down the whole time, because it's that very thing, like not being smooth on the throttle, which... again, can be a negative thing that you take away from the sim. So you got to be careful with that stuff too. Keep going back to the sim stuff. Like,
nah, you're good.
Oh,
yeah.
Because I think it was a huge help for my progression to get to where I am right now. And not claiming that I'm hot shit or anything like that. But it's like...
No, but I mean, you have something to claim because you've put in 5 times more work than anyone else getting into drifting
and
trying to learn it.
Like, this doesn't mean much, but like, I had a lap where one of the drones followed me at this past event, and they still have the line down from the competitions, like the gambler competitions.
Dude, that's
right?
another thing. This is something I found out the other day, maybe a couple weeks ago. You can practice flying a drone in the sim.
I've never heard of that. That
There's
sounds
a
cool.
dude on Instagram. Like, apparently it's kind of a known thing, but you have to take up a driver's spot in order to do it in a lobby or something like that. Okay. So, like, you're chasing actual sim cars that are 2 people tandeming with each other in real life, or real life in the... however you would say that, whatever. But He's literally flying a drone like you would in real life. I was like, dude, that is insane.
It's not as cool as it sounds. When you said that, I thought you were like the VR control, like as you're in a like flying a drone, but you're just using like a simulator. But what you're talking about, I believe, is just a free cam inside of the game. So like you're using your arrows to go forward, back, up, and down. And then
No, this dude was using an actual
the actual drone controller. Oh, okay, never mind. That's
I don't know how he programmed it or whatever, but he was like, he has a camera on the controller and then a camera on the screen.
Gotcha.
Or screen recording or whatever it is of him actually flying it. And I'm like, bro, that's awesome.
It's impressive what these guys can pull off. Like,
so not only can you practice drifting in the sim, you can practice how to be a media guy in the sim.
Everybody loves
You're
drone
looking
videos.
to get into drifting somehow. Ta-da!
Everybody wants those videos, dude. Like,
yeah.
Like from all the media guys, as far as I've seen, that like the 10 Cup Loose, like the FPV guys are the ones that get all
I've
the attention.
overheard negotiations for drone guys. You can get a lot of money.
Well, they're not cheap too, and I think that you have to have some kind of license, especially at Englishtown. There's an airport right there. Like you're not allowed to fly a drone unless you're part of the event, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you could literally run into an airplane. It's
funny.
like you could almost throw a rock from
funny, but
from the Gambler to the airport that's right behind it. So I think some of them, there's some FAA ratings, I believe, that you can get to to fly drones like commercially, basically. It's
so
100% cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess okay. Sorry. The last question. We just keep rambling.
What I was finishing off with, like that Gambler, the layout that they have on the track, like with the drone shot of my lap of that, I actually send it to somebody like, hey, criticize this or like give it a score if you could, to like try to get feedback, like, okay, what do I need to do here and there? And the score that they gave me was like a 79 points. It feels like a qualifying run. Yeah. So that made me feel pretty confident that it's like if I were to go to like a Gambler,
lot of judges use drones to.
Well, what I mean by that is like it was also a training tool to like critique what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that just like.
I'm just saying it would be very accurate doing it that way because it's a drone shot.
This was in real life though. This was like from the event. Yeah. Like the guy, like when he gave me the score that he would evaluate me. He's not a judge, but he's been around it for a long time, right? And with that score in mind, it's like, okay, is that like a judge of what level I'm at right now when it comes to like with my experience? So like if I were to jump into a competition tomorrow and be running like 80-point qualifying runs, was that good or is that bad? Is that like up there, right? I don't know if a lot of people with like my level of real life experience would probably be doing that. I don't think without the sim. What I'm getting at, like basically trying to get a way to judge like where am I at with my driving, I guess.
Yeah, I get that.
You know, want to improve, so like trying to get more data as much as possible on it too is helpful, I think.
Oh yeah, analytics are everything. Shit. All right. Well, okay. So last question would be, if you had the ability to speak to the entire world, what would your one message be?
How deep do we want to go?
It's on you.
Talk to people, even if you disagree with them. Because if you don't have the ability to defend and discuss your ideas against somebody else's, whatever they are, religious, political, car, plane, whatever it may be, cat, dog, if you're not able to talk about it, then bigger problems ensue. Where I heard a big quote before was like, when the conversation stops is when the violence begins. So yeah, talking to people from different walks of life, you might learn some stuff. Listen to everybody as if they have something that could be of value to you. I think is like a great way to deal with new people. Especially like going into something new where I'm surrounded by new people that I never met before. It's like having that mindset. You're going to get a lot of bullshit too. Like you got to be able to sift through that.
Yeah,
but
that's anywhere.
Again, even if you don't agree with somebody, listening to them a lot of times will serve you way better than just dismissing them immediately.
Yeah. That's probably the most real advice we've gotten for that question. So I love that. That's awesome. All right. Well, cool. Do you want to plug yourself or plug anybody?
Just
something like that?
Me, myself, and I am Phil the Dent Guy in Central Jersey. If you need painless dent removal, give me a shout. I'm on Google, Instagram. Most of my car content now is going on my business page as well. Nice. So if you want to see videos of me driving or whatever for whatever reason, And hopefully here in the near future, I'll have some t-shirts up on my website for sale too. Like if you want to contribute to some tires, that'd be nice.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you got about 3 weeks, so get them ready before then. Yeah. I'm just kidding. But yeah, well, that all?
Yeah. Awesome.
Sweet. Well, again, thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
awesome.
awesome.
Great guest. Let me know who you guys want to kind of see on coming up in the future. I've got an opening for some travel and stuff, so let me know what bigger names you want to see.
Englishtown.
I need to make it back up there. I didn't drive whenever I went, but
you might have
dude,
a C6 you could drive.
So okay, all right.
Make something happen.
We can talk about it. But yeah, so that's all I got really. So I appreciate it. Check below the video. Make sure the subscribe button is not still red. Click it if it is. But all the links to anything you will actually need are always in the description. Especially in Juku. I know we talked about a lot of parts. And just different upgrades and stuff that you could do. Don't forget, check them out for anything you might need. But that's all we got. So I'll see you each and every Sunday for a brand new episode.
Trust no bitch, can't catch no feelings. I've been taking long flights from the Bay to Ibiza. Hit home runs, I'm a ball like Jeter. I just want fuck, then I leave. I'm a young pop star, call the boy Justin Bieber. Got a little money if you want, I can teach you. Whole life a movie, you can watch it in theater. Stacking money up to the ceiling. Trust no bitch, can't catch no feelings. I've been taking long flights from the Bay to Ibiza. Hit home runs, I'm a ball like Jeter. I just want fuck, then I leave. I'm a young pop star, call the boy Justin Bieber. Got a little money if you want.